believe we're all here. I'd like to welcome you to the City Council meeting today, and thank you for your attendance. And we'll hope to have a good meeting. As we begin our meeting, I would ask you to join me in an invocation, please. Dear God, we thank you for a beautiful day in our city, for life itself, for the opportunity to work and live in this community, and we thank you for all the people that make Abilene a special place to live and be. Lord, our prayer today on our hearts is that we need a lot of rain.
Yes, Lord.
And we specifically ask for not only a lot of rain, but a lot of runoff into our lakes and reservoirs, because we need that so bad. And we pray believing that you can answer our prayers. And by faith, we ask you to grant these blessings to us. We pray for men and women who defend us all over the world, and we're always mindful of the people that are right here in Abilene who make up Dyess Air Force Base, and we ask your blessings on them as they serve. For everything that we have and we do, that we pray we use all of these blessings as we serve you. May we serve you in view of eternity. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I have with me Jaylyn Childers. She is a third grade student at Alley Ward Elementary. And her father, James, where is James? There he is, right? James Childers is the director of community services. And I believe you said you had brothers and sisters, but they're not with you today. But when this is on TV, show it to them that you were here and you got to be on TV for the meeting. We're glad you're here, and we're going to have a council meeting today and talk about things that are involved in Abilene. And next week we talk about the budget. And the budget kind of sets the priorities for what we're going to do. And it involves a lot of things that involve children in our parks and sidewalks and all the things that make that up. So it's always good that we keep in mind that we have a future in Abilene, and it's people like you that we think about when this happens. So we're glad that you can. I know you're in the middle of summer, and it's special that you got up to come down here, because you could have slept in maybe this morning, and that would have been good too. But Jaylyn, we're glad you're here. We appreciate your dad's work here for the city, and we're going to turn around, and I'm going to let you lead us in the pledges right now. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
The audience may be seated. This morning, before we begin, I want to make a comment that's been a lot of discussion. It's been in the media, and I want to, in hopes of perhaps clarifying something that may be of interest to people that hear this on television or through the media. There's been a lot of discussion that a new super Walmart is coming to Abilene, and that they have chosen a site which is at the on the south side of Loop 322 and Oldham Lane, which is also FM 1750. That site is on, if you look, it would be at the southwest corner of the intersection of Oldham and the Loop. That site has already been zoned general commercial almost all of the property on and around the loop, which includes things like Cisco College. There's Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's convenience stores. There's primetime entertainment. There's restaurants. There's AEP has a big plant there. So all of that fits into the general commercial, but this particular area is close and adjacent to a residential neighborhood. But the zoning is already in place. And so when a company like Walmart comes to town and they are looking at places, if they need zoning for general commercial, that property is already zoned correctly for them. It is adequate. The only thing they have to do is to apply for a plat where this is all going to sit on the site, what that will do for where it will sit in the traffic, where there will be entrances and exits. And so this item, if they choose to do so, will not come before the city council. And so there is not an opportunity for the council to deny that if that's all in place. If they present a plat to the P&Z, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it meets all the requirements of a certified plat, then the P&Z would by law would have to approve that because it met all the requirements. So people have asked, well, what can we do? The only thing that I think we would say to you is that you would consider appealing to Walmart that you think that if you disagree with it, there could be a better location for that. The big boxes traditionally have, while they bring a lot of retail, they bring more jobs. Not everyone wants it in and near their neighborhood. And although there's a lot of people that like to know there would be one in that part of town, so they wouldn't have to go as far. And so I just bring this up to clarify that the zoning for this area has already been established. It meets the zoning requirement that they would need for that property. And so this will not, at this point, be coming to the city council. So if people choose to do something other than talk to Walmart, I wanted to establish that that's the case for that. So that's for the record, and I just wanted to make that opening statement today. For the record, Councilwoman Miller is not here with us today. I would also like to say that starting on Monday at 1:30 in this room, the City Council will take up our annual budget meetings, our budget workshops. By the charter that we all work under, the charter requires that the city manager, Mr. Gilley, is responsible for presenting a budget that he presents to us every year, and that budget becomes the basis by which we approve a revised budget for this fiscal year we're in, and also the next fiscal year, which begins October 1 of 2014. So starting on Monday at 1:30, we will have budget meetings that will go from 1:30 till the afternoon. It could be as late as 5 or 5:30 or 6. We will resume on Tuesday morning at 8:30, at which time we will take up the budget, and we will continue to work on the budget until we have established both a tax rate and a revised budget and a fiscal year 15 budget, at which time there will be 3 different public hearings on the budget. 2 will be in the month of August, and 1 will be in the month of September, in which people will have a chance to both appeal and talk about the budget for the tax rate and the budget itself. And so with that in mind, we established that as our budget workshop moving forward. In the event that we were, do we have Wednesday scheduled if necessary?
Have it on there if necessary.
So if for some reason by the end of Tuesday we have not reached a decision on the budget, we will move into Wednesday. And I don't believe we have it past Wednesday, but we will work on it until it's done, because we have to complete that before the end of the fiscal year to have public hearings in order for the budget to go into effect October 1. So for the record, next Monday, 1:30 here in this room, we begin the budget process and workshops to discuss the future of our budgets. So we now move to our agenda. And our agenda, hold on a second. Somewhere. And you're only working with the computer, it takes a second to get there. Okay. The council has been given the minutes of the the July 10th regular city council meeting. At this time, are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes as they were presented? Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Hardaway, a second by Councilman Spano. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote.
Councilman Hardaway,
Yes.
Councilman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilman Price,
Yes.
Councilman Spano,
Yes.
Councilman Williams,
Yes.
Mayor Archibald.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The motion carries, and the minutes of the July 10th meeting are approved as presented. We now move to the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of items 6.1 through 617. All items listed on the consent agenda will be considered with one motion, and there will be no separate discussion unless a council member or a citizen requests separate discussion. I would like to say for the record this morning that of the 17 items on the consent agenda, 13 of them are a first reading. All items that are of ordinance nature are required to have a first reading and a second reading. The public hearing is always scheduled for the second reading, which will be at the meeting on August the 14th. So there's a lot of zoning issues, mainly zoning, and if you choose to do so today, you can make a comment about it, but I do want for the record for you to know that the public hearing will be held and the final reading on August the 14th on those 13 items. But it does not preclude that someone could pull an item to discuss it today, although no action will be taken on it and it is not considered a public hearing. So there are a total of 17 items on the consent agenda, and they will all be considered with one motion, unless a citizen or a council member wishes to discuss one of those individually. So at this time, does anyone on the council wish to discuss any item on the consent agenda separately?
Mayor, I'm going to abstain from item 5.
Item 6.5? Okay. Does anyone else on the council want to consider any item separately? Okay. Does any citizen wish to consider any item on the consent agenda separately? Okay. Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda items 6.1 through 617 at this time.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Williams. Was that you? A
Yes.
second by Councilman Hardaway. Is there any further discussion?
I need to abstain on 6.4 and 6.12.
6.4 and 12.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Any other abstentions? We have a motion and a second. Seeing no other discussion, we're ready to vote.
Councilman Williams,
Yes.
Councilman Hardaway,
Yes.
Councilman McAllister,
Yes.
Councilman Price,
Yes.
Councilman Spano,
Yes.
Mayor Archibald.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The motion carries and the items are approved. If one of these items that you have an interest in that will be for a second reading and public hearing, that meeting will be Thursday, August the 14th in this room. We now move to the regular agenda. The first item is item 7.1, and I believe John James is going to present this item.
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. This is our annual review and approving of the one-year action plan for the CDBG and home federal grant programs. We adopt a 5-year consolidated plan that lays out a 5-year plan of action for the use of those federal funds, but then each year we adopt a 1-year plan indicating to the Department of Housing and Urban Development how we intend to use those funds for the coming year. So again, the CDBG and Home are two different grant programs sponsored by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. CDBG is a more broad-based community development block grant program that provides benefits to low and moderate income households throughout the community. The home program is more specifically limited. It still has a focus on low and moderate income folks, but the specific interest of the home program is housing, improving housing in the community, whereas CDBG is a little bit broader than that, not just housing, but other community services, infrastructure, and those sort of things. A consolidated plan does include a process that included citizen participation, including public hearings, review by the Office of Neighborhood Services Advisory Council, and a number of other elements to that plan that lays out, again, how we intend to spend the funding for the coming year based on the goals and objectives established in that 5-year consolidated plan. We do have some guidelines that we have to follow in terms of how this money can be spent. First is meeting the HUD national objectives. So at the very minimum, we have to meet the federal requirements for these grant funds, and they can only be used for those things designated. It also has to meet that consolidated plan I mentioned, our 5-year plan. We have to, all of the funds that are expended have to be addressing one of the goals and objectives in that consolidated plan. As I mentioned, the primary purpose of these programs is to benefit low and moderate income people in the community, and so a minimum of 70% of the funding has to go specifically to programs that benefit that community. And then finally, you all historically have adopted a policy that these funds only be used for capital projects. Building things, helping with buildings, those sorts of things that are long-term investments in the community and not for operating expenses. As you'll see, that some of the funds that we use are funded out to the community groups. For example, this year one of the projects we're funding is the day nursery and helping them with some capital improvements, but these funds cannot be used for their operating expenses, their day-to-day salaries and recurring expenses. So first we'll talk a little bit about CDBG. Our grant funding amount authorized amount for this coming year is about $820,000. Reprogrammed funds, those are just funds from previous years that were not spent for whatever reason. Those get folded into the coming year's budget as well for a total of a little over $830,000. Just a little history, you'll see that back in 1996 we received about $1.5 million, and each year that's gone down as those federal grant programs, a couple of things have happened. One is that those programs have seen reduction in funding, but also there are more communities around the country that are eligible, and so the pie that is there gets split up in more pieces. And so both of those things have resulted in our funding decreasing almost every year. This is basically how that funding is split up for this year. One thing I'll note is this Section 108 debt right here. That's significantly less. You may recall in years past that has been as high as I think in $500,000 or $600,000. As we've continued to pay off those Section 108 debts, that amount is shrinking, and I'll show you a slide in a minute that will show when that will be fully paid off. And as that happens, more of that funding is then freed up for other projects and programs, something else I'll be talking about in just a second. This is just basically what was shown on that pie chart, but listing out the different programs. There is some administrative costs that are covered by this, salaries of our staff for the Office of Neighborhood Services, and then program delivery. The Target Neighborhoods, that is our Annie project, where we are making, Annie is the Abilene Neighborhood Initiatives. We are making infrastructure improvements in our targeted neighborhoods that have been identified. And this year is an increase to $150,000, again, based on the Section 108 funds being freed up. We also have our Critical Limited Repair Program, which offers assistance to low and moderate income homes or owners of homes to make improvements that are critical, basically emergency repairs. If a sewer line breaks and it's a family that just simply can't afford to address that immediate health and safety concern, this is a pot of money that they can come in and say, hey, I need help, and it's available for them for that.
And John, those, and that's for low mod neighborhoods, is that correct? They have to be out of the flood zone, is that?
That's correct. This federal funds cannot be used in a flood zone. There's some other restrictions as well. In this case, the critical limited repair doesn't have to necessarily be in a low mod neighborhood. It has to assist a low mod family, low and moderate income family. Adult Protective Service Partners, that's one of these community groups that has requested funding this year that we're recommending approval. As I mentioned, Day Nursery is seeking funds for some improvements to their facilities, and then of course the Section 108 debt repayment. We also can fund some public services. It's capped at 15% of our CDBG funds, and we're proposing helping to fund the Access to Jobs program, which is a CityLink funding to help run bus service to get from low and moderate income neighborhoods out to job locations. And then the home program, very similar, but again limited to helping with housing in the community. Our funding for home is a little bit smaller than CDBG. It's about $369,000. Reprogrammed funds, again, are carryover funds from projects that either had leftover funds or projects that just didn't happen in previous years. And this is a program that includes some loans or things that get paid back, and so you'll see program income there when property owners pay back their share of the improvements that are made in a home, for example. That comes back to us as program income that can be folded in to help in the future. So our total there is about $750,000 for the coming year. Similarly, home funds, you'll notice actually from 96 actually jumped up in 2004. And of course, there are a lot of years in between there that we don't show, but this is just representative showing that similar to CDBG, home funds have decreased from 2004 to the present. Similar reasons to CDBG, just decreased funding and sharing the money with more communities around the country. We have, as I mentioned, this is for housing. We have a single-family rehabilitation program. That's where the bulk of this money goes to help rehabilitate houses that are in poor condition. And again, this is an application process where low and moderate income families can come apply and say, you know, my house really needs help and I just can't afford it myself. So they can ask for assistance. And there are guidelines for that. For example, we only can put in so much into a house. These are not expensive improvements. I mean, these are improvements that are basic, minimal improvements to bring houses up to code. It's not creating a Taj Mahal out of a house. It's really just addressing critical needs for those homes.
Is that capped based on an amount or based on a type of work, or both?
Both. We've implemented a new criteria that caps it basically based on the value of the home. If the home's only worth $40,000, we don't want to put $60,000 into it.
Right.
And so there are some limits in terms of the program criteria. We also have a first-time home buyer program, which is basically a grant for first-time home buyers to provide a little assistance of a couple $1,000s to help with down payments or closing costs. We also have what's called a community housing development organization. 15% of our home funds are required to be spent only on community housing development organizations, or CHODOs. We currently have one CHODO within the city, and that's Habitat for Humanity. And so that 15% is, we're proposing to go to them for that. And then again, we have planning and project administration, which helps cover some of the salary costs for our staff that oversees these programs. This is the pie chart showing that breakdown. Again, most of the funding from home goes for single-family rehabilitation and reconstruction of homes. I mentioned I'm going to talk a little bit about the Section 108 program. You'll see here that the Windsor and Wooten, the Windsor has been paid off, the Section 108 debts that went to help rehabilitate that building. The Wooten will be paid off in August, so next month that Section 108 loan will be paid off. The only remaining would be the TMP warehouse, and that only has a little over $230,000 left. That will be paid off in August of 2016, completely freeing up all of those Section 108 funds. And then finally, this is showing us the amount of funding that has been freed up as we've paid off those Section 108 debt payments. Next year, we will be doing an update to that 5-year consolidated plan. And so one of the things we will be asking from you all is how we want to allocate that increased funding that's been freed up from Section 108. As we've done this year, some of that is going to our Abilene Neighborhood Initiatives program, making infrastructure improvements in those target low-income neighborhoods. Some of it could go to existing programs, increasing the funding of those existing programs. We could come up with new programs that we haven't done in the past simply because we haven't had enough funding to do those programs. And then, of course, with the CDBG funds, some of that can go, we could have more of it go out to community groups for those community projects for nonprofits in the community.
Jeff, I can interject here. Jay, we had a conversation that started in 2009 about 5 target neighborhoods that we call ANNING, Abilene Neighborhood Initiative. And although I think the TNP project, the Windsor, and the Wooten were all good projects, those funds are designed to go to low-mod neighborhoods. And so as a council, we've talked about, as we retire this debt, to then use some of those funds back to those neighborhoods for 3 specific purposes. First of all, elevate the quality of life in those neighborhoods, and then to address element of the land use plan, which infill redevelopment, provide incentives and other capital opportunities to help rehab those neighborhoods. And so glad to see that by August 16, that debt is retired, and we use these funds for a better purpose in the community that would have benefit for all.
That's true. Thank you.
And I think that's an overview of our one-year action plan and CDBG and home budget proposal. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, John. Does council have any questions of John on these items that involve the CBDG and the fund? Yes?
I have a question on the home revenue sources page. If I'm reading this correctly, we're getting 369,000, but we had 353 left over. Is that a unique situation? I mean, if we're not spending it, why do we need more if we already have that much?
Well, and I'll let maybe Sandy can answer better than I can about what the source of those reprogrammed funds are. Again, this is a federal grant program that we get every year. So, I mean, we're going to get that, unless we decline it, we're going to keep getting that funding every year regardless of how much we have left over.
Okay.
Good morning, Council. Sandy Bowen, Office of Neighborhood Services. We are faced with a continuing challenge to spend home funds because of the difficulty in the requirements. So we've had, in the past, let's say 7 years, some projects that did not meet criteria that we had
Didn't meet federal criteria?
correct, and could not meet a timeline criteria. So they couldn't meet the criteria, the project didn't make. And with a new home rule, a final rule that went into effect in the end of 2013, that those restrictions have gotten tighter and tighter, and the timing of the spending has gotten shorter and shorter. So it is our goal to get that spent in a timely manner before it goes away.
So what's the plan then?
The plan right now is to continue to seek some contractors, number one. One of the new challenges we're facing is to have licensed, certified lead abaters that can work on the older homes in Abilene that have lead-based paint in them. We used to have 3 contractors. The regulations for the certification have continued to get more and more extreme, more and more costly. And our small contractors that do our single-family rehab don't have the funds available to them in their personal business to set aside for a week of training for a person that is not going to perhaps work for them for very long. A familiarity and a good base knowledge on the safety issues of handling lead-based paint. So they have determined that it's not in their best interest to continue those certifications. We have plans to check surrounding towns, communities, to see if there are contractors that would be willing to come here if we had, say, several houses lined up for them to rehab. So that has slowed the number of houses we can rehab because the home final rule says we have to bring the entire house up to code. We can't say, we're going to fix this part, but we don't want to touch the lead-based paint part. We're not allowed to do that. So it is a challenge.
So there's demand. It's complicated because of the lack of qualified or certified contractors being able to do the work because the project has to be the entirety in regards to getting up to code. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so your plan is to look, not just in our community, but even in the region for accredited.
We were checking this morning, reaching out to Lubbock, and you say, how can a contractor afford to come to Abilene? So, yes, it's going to cost us more to get someone to come in and do that. But that's the only alternative. Like I said, we had 3, and those 3 have found it not fiscally responsible of them to continue to put money into that. To help them with that, we have made a pilot program available to them to help them with a bonus to, if they are working on a lead-based paint home, we pay them a bonus. And that was taken advantage of for a little while. But then again, they lose the employees that are trained. And
how much is that training, just ballpark?
Probably the first year outlay just for the training would be in the neighborhood of $1,200 to $1,600, depending on what level you're going to certify each one of your employees. All people who touch repair of any kind are required by the state to be lead-safe work practices certified. And the state has to provide that. We used to be able to train them here at the city, and the state shut that down. So they're responsible to pay a fee for a class where we were doing it for them. It's just become more and more difficult with the regulations that we are.
Other questions?
I think, and I understand that there are some challenges. I think maybe something we need to be wary of from this point forward, if we can't spend the money they give us, I mean, we try and we can't, then maybe at some point we need to look at just not taking it, because there's strings involved with that. So I think that's just something maybe we want to look forward at. I mean, just because it's there Doesn't mean we have to take it. And I don't, and you know, if we're getting this money with all these strings attached to it and we can't spend it, you know, if every year we're rolling over $350,000, that's just something I would like to be able to look at going forward from here.
I understand that, and there are communities who have made that decision.
Okay.
What are the repercussions of just declining those funds?
Don't get the money.
What HUD
just
would
don't-
do with that,
Yeah.
what HUD would do with that money, you mean, are we going to get a black spot on our
I was
record?
about to say, I mean, what?
No, no, they understand.
Yeah.
They're the ones having to enforce it, and they're like, they're at a loss as well as we are, as far as our representation in the regional office. I said, it looks like, you know, there's a possibility we have some money that doesn't get spent by the program year deadline, older money, and I was told, yes, there are several communities who are having. So what they do when they get that money back is they offer a notice of funding availability. They call it a NOFA, one of those good acronyms. So they put out a NOFA, and generally the larger communities, the bigger
snap
towns,
that up in a minute.
jump up and down for that, and they can put it to use because that's where those types of certifications
Or more
make
common.
sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question.
Yes.
Part of it, based on the presentation, it says that there's a HUD required 15% that goes to CHODOs. Is
Yes.
that a minimum, a maximum?
That's a minimum.
That's
That's a
it.
minimum. So
So could
if-
part of this money
yes.
go towards
Yeah.
Habitat for Humanity because we've got people that are going to benefit involved in the work,
Yes.
and then we're just helping to facilitate that
And
process?
we have done that in the past, Councilman Price, and Habitat is aware that that is a possibility if they find a need for additional funding. For instance, this year they applied for $90,000.
Okay.
And this is the portion, this that you see in this budget, that's the 15% mandatory. What our budget is asking is that you approve all of the home budget, understanding that if some area falls a little short, I can have the discretion to say, and go work through our chain to say, can we use this? We have this
And,
extra.
and to follow up on the discussion from Councilman Hardaway and McAllister, is it an all or nothing? If we say we can't spend the money, do we have to decline all the money, or can we say we can use this amount for Habitat for Humanity at CHODO, and that's all that we really can use, and decline the rest?
Okay. The formula is that you have to set aside 15% of your entitlement funds.
So that's a maximum.
So it's a minimum amount I can give to Habitat,
Right.
but I have to have an entitlement program of home funds to take the 15% from.
Okay. So we need to take it. We have to take it all or nothing, is what I'm hearing.
And if I can elaborate on that a little bit, Councilman, I believe, if I understand the program correctly, the funds, there is a period of time we have to spend those funds. If they are not spent within that window that is established, then those funds have to be sent back to HUD. So the answer to your question is we accept the funds. If we can't spend all of them, the portion that we cannot spend within the allotted time would then have to be returned to HUD.
Okay.
Correct?
And if we cannot spend specifically the CHODO set aside of 15%, that piece can go back. Or we can say, we can't spend our 15% CHODO funds, take it now.
Well, no, I was saying
We don't have a
other.
CHODO.
I was saying the opposite. That the CHODO was the only portion that we were taking, not that we weren't spending that.
No,
But
we
if that's
can't.
all that we
We
can-
can't just take CHODO.
Okay.
I don't spend too much time on this, but I just think that, to Kyle's point, we look at the allocation and look at the program funds, and so most of the money that was allocated last year was not spent. And I would just say if we have 3 contractors that are certified, cost $1,000 for certification, to be creative and provide some scholarships for those 3 contractors.
Yes, sir.
Use these funds. There's demand in our community. It's opportunity to bring back some taxes we've paid as community and let people benefit here in Abilene. That's probably a better way to look at it and just make that happen.
The other answer I get to that is, Sandy, I can't afford to pay the hotel rooms and the meals for somebody to go to wherever the training is for a whole week.
Well, you know, 'cause
so we can pay for the training, Councilman Williams. We can pay for the training, and that's one of our options.
So we have a packed room. We have Brian Bethel here, and we have Jason here from the chamber, and so hope that goes out to the community, and maybe some people take advantage of. We can use these funds to help rehab housing.
Part of our plan is to also do a news release or press release, asking, making it known that we need some lead-based paint certified contractors. So, I mean, that will, just with the social media we have now, that would reach a far greater area for us. And like I say, I know there are some in Lubbock. Whether they would like to send a crew here for a week, for a month, for 2 months, rehab an entire house, they might.
Any other questions?
Could we have a training session here to train people to do this?
No, it's all state. When they took that away from us, that was another, I call it a squish.
Okay, I was just saying, instead of us having to send people, if we could have I don't know if they would.
If we would host one for the whole area, we would have to guarantee X number of participants.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea to have, Councilman. It's certainly worth exploring.
I mean, if
Be creative.
yeah, if we could all host one for the area, and then all of a sudden bring in people from all around, it fills several needs. It brings people to our town, which we always enjoy, but it allows people here to have the opportunity to learn that skill, which is something they can use down the road, and it hopefully will allow us to expand the use of this.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Council has been presented this we do this every year. It's part of setting the budget for the next year. This item calls for a public hearing to review these things. At this time, I'm going to open the public hearing, and anyone who would like to speak for or against the programming for the CBDG and home programs, if you'd like to come forward and state your name for the record, I'll open it at this time. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. This comes to us as a recommendation from staff. It is recommended that we approve these resolutions approving the one-year action plan for the CBDG and the home funds, and they've been presented as you've heard today.
Move for approval.
I have a motion by Councilman Price. I have a second by Councilman Williams. Now, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote.
Councilman Price?
Yes.
Councilman Spano?
Yes.
Councilman Williams?
Yes.
Councilman Hardaway?
Yes.
Councilman McAllister?
Yes.
Mayor Archibald?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries, and the programs are completed for the next year. We move to item 7.2. Item 7.2 is a second reading and a public hearing on the ordinance amending the Chapter 10 of the Fire Protection and Prevention, the Fire Code, smoking restrictions by the Code of the City of Abilene. I would like to ask a question before we begin this item when we have our public hearing, and I'm doing this for our timing of this. At this point, how many of you are prepared today at this time to come and speak for or against this? Do we have any ideas of? Okay, just a second. Okay. I'm going to put a restriction on our timing. We for our public hearings, as we do from time to time, and we're going to allow 5 minutes for anyone to speak. I think you'll find out 5 minutes is adequate time. We want to be fair to everyone in doing so. Up here on the podium, there's a little box there at the top. It'll show you how much time is left On top of that, when it gets down to 1 minute, it will make a little beep. When it gets to 0, the timer goes to 0, then it will be a loud beep, and we would ask you to conclude your remarks at that time. So Kelly Messer of the City Attorney's Office is going to present this item. Kelly?
Good morning. I'm Kelly Messer, Assistant City Attorney. The item before you amends our current smoking ordinance simply by adding in electronic cigarettes. And so first, I'm going to give you a little background. In 2009, the FDA did a study of e-cigarettes. They found that there were detectable levels of various carcinogens and toxic chemicals in e-cigarettes. They found that the quality control processes to manufacture these were inconsistent among different brands or non-existent. The studies included 18 different samples. 1% of one sample included the chemical, I didn't write the scientific name, but it's the chemical included in antifreeze. There were various other tobacco byproducts, and nicotine, I believe, was found in all of the samples. No nicotine labeled samples contained low levels of nicotine anyway, even if the label was low nicotine. Products with the same label emitted different amounts of nicotine with each puff, so there was not any kind of continuity with the labeling. One high nicotine cartridge delivered twice as much nicotine to the users than is delivered by an inhalation product approved for the FDA as a smoking cessation aid. And so I think initially, and maybe to some extent now, these were marketed as smoking cessation aids, but they still had varying degrees of nicotine and various other chemicals. Oops. Let's see.
Just hit the down button.
Okay. So e-cigarettes to this day haven't fully been studied, and there's no uniformity in the amount of chemicals that are in the nicotine that's inhaled, and also it's unknown how many harmful products and chemicals are in the vapors that are breathed by people who are breathing those secondhand vapors. Only the e-cigarettes marked for therapeutic purposes are currently regulated by the FDA, and I believe that's like Nicotrol or something like that. The FDA has issued a proposed rule that would extend the agency's tobacco authority to include products that meet the legal definition of tobacco product, including e-cigarettes, but this has not yet occurred. Also included from the information from the FDA are reports from individuals to the FDA of adverse effects of e-cigarettes, and these have just been reported to the FDA. Pneumonia, various other congestive heart failure, various other diseases that are potentially linked to e-cigarettes. So because of lack of regulation on higher levels, various cities across the country, including these cities in Texas, have chosen to regulate e-cigarettes. And, I hope everyone here knows that the city of Abilene, we're not proposing that e-cigarettes be prohibited or anything like that. We already have a current smoking ordinance that limits the smoking of tobacco in public places to protect those people who have chosen not to smoke and don't want to breathe that secondhand smoke. So various ordinances have regulated the same thing, prohibition in certain public places. Some of these cities have only prohibited, say, on municipal property, like not at City Hall or city parks. Other ordinances have also prohibited or regulated the use and possession and purchase by minors. And a point to make is part of what was found in FDA studies and also mentioned in articles is that some of these products are marketed but to have, strawberry flavor or cherry or bubblegum or flavors that appeal to children, and that's of great concern too. And so you see here this list of cities, which ones regulate both consumption and purchase by minors, and which ones regulate just where smoking is prohibited. And we're proposing that Abilene adopt both of those types of regulations today. The minor would be anew, but of course council can adopt one or the other, or both or none. So finally, I'll tell you, this is the summary of the proposed changes, because this is not really drastically changing our current smoking ordinance. First of all, we did add a definition of electronic cigarette for clarity, to define what it is and what it's not. And then smoking, the definition of smoking is already in the ordinance, but it's simply expanded to include inhaling, exhaling, vaping, or carrying a lighted e-cigarette. Retail tobacco store is also a current definition in the ordinance, but it is expanded to include establishment utilized primarily for the sale of e-cigarette or liquid nicotine. Also, this ordinance, the proposed ordinance amendment, has sections relating to minors. We're proposing that the sale of e-cigarettes to minors under the age of 18 be prohibited, that the possession, purchase, consumption of e-cigarettes would be prohibited. And also, part of that would be, going hand in hand with that would be a requirement that vendor-assisted sales be required. That would mean someone couldn't just go to a vending machine and purchase e-cigarettes or liquid nicotine. They would have to actually approach a clerk that would be able to verify that they're 18 years of age or older. And so with that, I would be happy to answer any questions. I will say that our health authority, Dr. Peter Norton, is here as well to answer any medical questions that you might have today.
Okay. Questions of Kelly on the ordinance that has been brought forward?
What's currently done in regards to minors? I mean, at this point, if you're 14, can you purchase, or is that the discretion of the retailer?
Well, at this point, tobacco, cigarettes and all of that is regulated by the Health and Safety Code to prohibit minors from purchasing tobacco. But since e-cigarettes are not yet regulated,
for e-cigarettes specifically.
Right now there is none, and that's why some cities are passing ordinances like this that would prohibit the sale to minors, because tobacco products, the traditional tobacco products, are prohibited for the purchase of minors.
And I know that I don't look like I'm anywhere close to 18, but I purchased all of these at different locations without having to show ID 1. There was no sign on any of the doors that said you have to be older than 18. There was no sign at the counter. I walked in, this from a vaping store, these from convenience stores. No ID was shown, didn't ask for an ID, gave them my money, walked out.
And currently that's legal until you choose to change the law
and
here.
that's that.
Well, thank you.
Other questions of Kelly on this? Okay, thank you, Kelly. Before we go to the public hearing, Dr. Norton, as our medical director, are you prepared to make some remarks? I would like to ask Dr. Norton, who is the medical director of the Abilene-Taylor County Public Health, I would like for you to be on the same time limit as everyone that is speaking. Following, I'm getting ready at this point to open the public hearing. Following, I wanted to hear from Dr. Norton as the medical director of the Abilene-Taylor County Public Health Department. Following Dr. Norton's remarks, anybody that would like to speak for or against this item is welcome to come up. Again, we're using a 5-minute time limit. And at that time, come up, state your name for the record. You will be given the chance to make any remarks that you would like, and we'll allow everyone that would like to speak the opportunity to do that. If this goes long, we might stop and take a break during the time for everybody's sake. But for right now, Dr. Norton, if you would, I'd like to hear from you as the medical director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. E-cigarettes are a product of China. They were developed and introduced into the United States in 2007. And in 2008, the sales of e-cigarettes was about 50,000. In 2012, the sales of e-cigarettes in the United States was 3.5 million. The device consists of a battery, an atomizer, a liquid cartridge, and an inhaler tip. It delivers a vapor including chemicals, a vapor containing chemicals including tobacco, and what Ms. Messer was telling us, propylene glycol. Propylene glycol is a substance that is also used in medications, so it's not necessarily a poison. It is used in some of the sedatives that are sold and approved by the FDA. The system was introduced to deliver low doses of nicotine to assist smokers in stopping smoking. The effectiveness of the cigarettes and e-cigarette in stopping smoking hasn't been established, and consequently the FDA has declined to approve or regulate the e-cigarette. The carcinogen levels in the vapor are significantly less than that in cigarettes. It's about 1/1000th of that in cigarettes. And so, relatively speaking to the community, to the people around you, it is much safer than the smoke that you would get from a cigarette. The lung changes studied seem not to be so severe as those with cigarettes. However, if you take the vapor and put it with cells, those cellular changes are similar to those in tobacco products. There may be fewer cardiovascular effects, which is one of the big problems with cigarettes. We worry about cigarettes causing lung cancer. Actually, the heart disease with lung cancer is much more significant. But the problems with e-cigarettes include a lack of scientific study to tell us exactly what the risks are or what their safety is. So I can't argue on a scientific basis whether this is a good or a bad thing. The problem that I have with e-cigarettes is that they are now marketed to non-smokers, particularly teens, and as such are considered a gateway to drug use. One study shows.
Would you, if you want to speak, you'll have a chance to speak.
One study shows that of 30 million European smokers, 15-year-olds are the most likely to use e-cigarettes. 30 million smokers and 15-year-olds are the most likely ones to be using e-cigarettes. The use of e-cigarettes in middle school and high school was 3.3% in 2011, and in 2012 it was 6.8%. Some anecdotal studies or reviews have shown as many as 60% of the high school kids have tried e-cigarettes. One of the other problems with e-cigarettes is that we're changing the name. Our discussion today is totally e-cigarettes, but vape pens and e-hookahs have changed the name of exactly the same thing, same product, in order to make it more acceptable because it's not a cigarette. It's not called an e-cigarette, it's called something different, and so you still have the same article, the same pen, the same cigarette, but it's called something different. It still has the vapor, the liquid that you put into it. Other cities outside of Texas have restricted the sales of e-cigarettes. Chicago restricts the sale of e-cigarettes near schools and subjects e-cigarettes to the same use restrictions as regular smokers. Santa Clara restricts the e-cigarette use to the same as regular smokers, except in multi-unit buildings where e-cigarettes may be used. And Santa Clara also plans to restrict the use of e-cigarettes in the same way that they do regular cigarettes, and currently that is by permit only. Do y'all have any questions about e-cigarettes?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
First one, this right here, when I went to purchase it, I asked the lady behind the counter, I want no nicotine, okay? And she pulled this out, and it says 0 mg nicotine. But on the side here, it says may contain nicotine. Now, when I buy, if I go get a Diet Coke without caffeine, it says caffeine-free, there's no caffeine in it. How can they get away with no nicotine, may contain nicotine?
It is not regulated by the FDA.
Okay. Second point. From the medical standpoint. This is from vapedojo.com. I printed it out yesterday. What is in vape juice? There are 5 ingredients in vape juice. Distilled water, propylene glycol. The FDA considers this safe. It's used in baked goods, medicines, cosmetics, soaps, etc. Vegetable glycerin. Is that how you pronounce that, glycerin?
Yes.
Also used in baked goods, sweeteners, and a filler in foods. Nicotine and flavoring. Artificial flavors, what would be in your can of soda. Obviously not Texas, because that would be Coke. Or lollipops or whatever. My question is, yes, all of these ingredients are safe when used for their intended purpose. Has there been any study of what propylene glycol does when inhaled?
The only study that would address that would be the cellular studies, which show that the vapes affect cells similarly to tobacco and nicotine products.
So
that is one of the problems with the FDA regulating any of this, is there aren't studies available. So there's really no answer to your question. The one thing that I look at medically is everything that is being used that you've described there is ingested, not inhaled.
I was going to say, the safety of these things is when it's used in its original purpose. Water, when used in its original purpose to drink and hydrate, is great. If you inhale water, it'll kill you.
Well,
so if you're not using these, well, I mean, if you breathe enough water in your lungs, it'll kill you.
Yeah.
So my question is, these chemicals are not being used I mean, if the FDA approves propylene glycol, they have not approved propylene glycol to be inhaled. Yes or no?
FDA has not addressed inhaling
Okay.
propylene glycol. And Mr. McAllister, your point is well taken, and I agree with it. However, if you're sick with a pulmonary issue, you're going to have a vaporizer and to inhale. So water inhaled, it can be effective in treating the lungs too.
Okay.
And that is just being fair to inhaling it.
That's fine, and that's what we're here to do, is to get the facts. Thank you.
Dr. Norton,
Yes, sir.
can you elaborate a little bit on the difference in the studies between how it affects the user and how it affects everybody else?
I could find no studies on that. The only thing that would address it somewhat is that the carcinogens in vape are 1/1000th of the carcinogens in tobacco smoke.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions of Dr. Norton? Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your work that you do for the Abilene-Taylor County Public Health Department. So at this time, the public hearing is open. If you would like to speak for or against this, would you come forward and state your name for the record, please? If you'd like to come down and sit on the front row so you can be ready to go when it's your time, you feel free to do that as well. You can sit if you want to sit back. Okay. I was talking about them. Go ahead.
My name is Jimmy Murphy. I represent Hedonism Vapor. I am an e-liquid manufacturer, and I appreciate the council letting me speak today. I was going to talk about what is in e-liquid. There are 4 main ingredients. Doctor said 5, distilled water. We'll add that. We'll concede that. Propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, food flavorings, and nicotine if required. And I'd like to talk about each one of these. As the doctor just stated, propylene glycol, from the FDA, there is no evidence in the available information on propylene glycol or propylene glycol monosaturate that demonstrates or suggests reason to suspect a hazard to the public when they're used at the levels that are now current or that might reasonably be expected in the future, and that is from 1973. We've been using propylene glycol since 1973 in smoke machines and various other food and cosmetic and pharmaceutical ways. It's used in foods as a humectant. Basically, it makes it so it's still moist. It's used in drugs that are insoluble in water, such as diazepam. It's also used as a base for albuterol, which is an asthma inhaler. It is also used in the FDA-approved Nicotrol inhaler. It is not vaporized, but it is inhaled by the FDA-approved smoking cessation device. OSHA does not have a permissible exposure limit on propylene glycol. This is OSHA. Let's talk about vegetable glycerin. It's made from palm, soy, or coconut oil by hydrolysis, which is basically heat, pressure, and water. We use, in e-liquids, we use a USP grade, pharmaceutical grade, same that's used in medicines at your pharmacy when you go to pick up your cough medicine for your child. The FDA finds that it's GRAS, which is generally regarded as safe. It's metabolized as sugar in the body. OSHA does have a permissible exposure limit of 15 milligrams milliliters per cubic meter aerosolized. And I'd like to show you, this is 15 milliliters. You'd have to aerosolize this in a cubic meter, all of it, to be against OSHA's limits. And in that space, you would not be able to see your hand in front of your face. This takes an average vapor 2 weeks to vape. So I wanted to point that out as well. It's used in food and pharmaceuticals. Nicotine. Contrary to popular belief, nicotine is not a carcinogen. It is a stimulant similar to caffeine, and is used in the treatment of diseases such as ADHD and Parkinson's disease. Now, the contested ingredient would be the food flavorings. They are FDA approved and generally regarded as safe for ingestion. There are many studies being done currently to check the safety of the food flavorings. Now, these are the same food flavorings that you get in your flavored coffees, in your Cokes, in many other things that you take every day. That is the series of contention, is the flavorings. Now, the contention is not for appealing to children. It's a matter of safety in the ingredients, because we don't know exactly what the ingredients are in there, and that's why the studies are being done. If this goes forward, you're basically throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I do agree that you should not sell e-cigarettes to anybody below 18 years of age. And I do like flavors. I'm a 39-year-old man, and I make e-liquid, and I sell e-liquid on the internet. And most of the people who buy my stuff are in their middle, 30s, early 40s, and they buy vanilla and cherry. Just because you're an adult does not mean that you cannot like flavors. It is not targeted to children. I would never sell to a children, and everybody I know that sells e-cigarettes would not sell to a child. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Jim, can I ask you questions? Do you have a bottle of the stuff you make?
No, I didn't bring any of the stuff that I make.
Okay. Can you tell me what's in this?
No, because I didn't make it.
That's my point.
Well, that's now I'm going to
No, let me finish. I got this at a store. I walked in. The guy said, "What do you want?" I said, "Black cherry." He goes to the back. He brings out this bottle. He says, "What milligram do you want of nicotine?" I said, 10. There's a row of bottles in front of him. He pulls out a bottle that's not labeled, except it's got a little handwritten 9 mg on it. Mm-hmm. Okay? He takes this bottle, takes the nicotine, puts it on the lid, squeezes the bottle to suck, I'm assuming nicotine. It had no label on it. Sucks it, a couple of times, looked at it, did it again, shook it up and handed it to me. No measuring, no indication of what is in this. And that's my concern. I have no idea what's in this. I have absolutely no idea. Here's one that actually came sealed. Nowhere on here does it tell me what is in this.
Okay. I'm going to say that is beyond the scope of what you're proposing here. This is a smoking, an amendment to the smoking ban in public places. What's in that e-liquid is not pertinent to this discussion. The discussion is how this affects other people, not the people that are doing it.
Well, but if I don't know what's in here and I inhale it and then blow it out, what am I blowing out that other people have to walk into? That's my concern, is that you don't know what's in here.
But that's what the FDA is doing. That's not the concern of the city council. That's the concern of the FDA, which is in process. Until they make a full decision, you cannot make a definitive decision. You're banning because you don't understand it. We once thought tomatoes were evil and bad and would kill you, but we know they're not.
I got an ad here from a 1944 Life magazine. It talks about how great tobacco is. Okay, because back then they thought it was okay.
Well, and
But
they also had big tobacco.
but now we know differently. So, prove less irritating when smokers change. Facts reported in medical journals on clinical tests made by distinguished doctors that cigarettes were safe. We now know they're not. So you're telling me this is safe?
I don't know.
You don't know, and that's the point.
But
that is my point. My other question is this. When you sell on the internet, do you require people to provide proof that they are 18 or older?
Yes.
And what kind of a?
They are required to agree to my terms of service, and they are required to put in their birth date, and they're also required to acknowledge that they're over 18.
But someone who's 15 could feasibly. I mean, and not just you. I'm not just pointing out you, because I know people do this all the time. But someone younger than 18 could purchase e-liquids off your site.
Yes, if they wanted to go to a porn site, they could go to that too.
That's not what we're discussing today.
If they have a credit card, I've given everything that I've done on my website says is following the law. It says I have to make sure I give them every opportunity to say they're 18 or above. I make 3 requirements.
Okay.
That's more than the law requires.
Okay. I'm just saying, and it's my concern is that we have no idea what's in these 2 things.
Well,
and yet,
some of those are from China. Those are made in China. Most juices
made in USA.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it says. I mean,
okay.
This one doesn't have ingredients. I don't know where this one's made.
And that's part of the FDA decision is the labeling of e-liquid bottles.
And that's part of my concern is that.
Well, and again, that is with the FDA and not a smoking. You're putting us back where we started. Most of us have quit smoking with e-cigarettes. We don't say that they're safe. We say they're a safe alternative. Okay? And the exposure to other people, as studies have shown, is minimal.
But it's still there. It's minimal.
Minimal, okay. It's less than a peanut allergy.
Okay.
Still eat peanuts.
Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Anyone else like to speak?
I just have a question, Mr. Mayor.
You'll have a chance to speak.
Are we going to have the city council members be argumentative with the people? The people are here to speak. Can we listen to them speak rather than being argumentative? I mean, what are we here for? Are we to hear the citizens of Abilene, Texas, or are we here to have one of your council members pontificate?
Okay.
That's all I'm asking. Are you going to put a restriction on the folks who sit up here in the behind the dais?
I believe his questions were valid, and he wanted to wanted to hear from the person who presented
all right,
the information.
now I understand your position. Then why don't you turn this off? Because the citizens of the city of Abilene have as much of a right to stand here and bring up the weaknesses of the particular councilman and point out his lack of knowledge and his opinionation, quite simply. So this is worthless. All you're doing is restricting the citizens. And do we want the citizens to speak today? Do we really want citizens to speak, to be heard, to hear what the taxpayer and the people who live in this city?
From time to time, we have restrictions for the sake of time. We don't want people to consider that we'll be here till 10 o'clock tonight. But
The way we're going, it's going to take
Hey,
a long time.
Jimmy,
would you hold it?
Okay.
Would the next speaker come forward? We're going to continue to use the 5-minute timer.
Okay, go ahead.
5 minutes is adequate, and we're going to continue.
All right. My name is Aaron, for the record.
What is your last name?
Fornwalt.
Can you come a little closer, please?
You'll
I'm
have-
sorry.
you speak.
Aaron Fornwalt. Now, on the use of an atomizer, vaporizer, whatever you want to call it, this thing right here is a healthier, more beneficial alternative than smoking. Smoking cigarettes killed my grandmother on May 2nd of this year. That forced me to quit smoking. And May 3rd, I was up there to 151 Vapes to see about stopping. And I've been on this for 2 months and roughly, I'll say, 20 days. The first benefit of this is that I no longer have to use my inhaler. I have asthma, and I don't have to use that at all. Thanks to the propylene glycol that can be delivered through this guy. And I actually keep propylene glycol, otherwise known as PG, out of my e-liquids. All because I prefer it to not be in there, because I just would rather have it this way. And even without the propylene glycol being present, I still do not have to use my inhaler. Now, on to the next subject of vegetable glycerin. That stuff is just plant plasma. That's going out. It's like going out and biting a piece of grass. It's not going to bother you, unless you have, of course, an allergen to grass. But anyways, on the newspaper I read that this stuff was detrimental, was it, to people's health? Let me ask you. You've been in the presence of this thing since I stepped in the room. How many of you feel ill? How many of you feel some sort of having pain of some sort? It's not detrimental. Now, if I were to rip this thing, take a good long drag off of it and blow it in here, the only thing you guys would know is that I blew out a cloud that dissipates in a matter of 5 minutes, and you catch a nice scent of caramel with a scent of a small undertone of Bavarian cream. Now, anyways, what exactly is it that causes you, gentlemen, to say it's detrimental? Who claims this? I've been on this thing for, 2 months, and I well and believe that that's long enough to figure out if I'm going to get sick from this thing or not. I quit smoking because of this thing, and now that I guess you could say the world is experiencing another small change, tobacco industries are suffering, and you gentlemen are possibly being piggybacked by that guy. And they're saying, hey, we don't want that because our sales are down. That's not exactly grounds to ban this from a public place, or just to kind of ban it in general, or say it's detrimental. The doc, wherever he is, his scientific basis, he could have used a little bit more elaboration on that, and actually could have came to our defense on some of the things. In short, this isn't detrimental. It doesn't bother anyone. I don't have to use my inhaler. I quit smoking, and I'm working my way down the nicotine level, which is now a grand total of 2 milligrams. And an allergic reaction to this, the only way you could have an allergic reaction is if you are reactive to any of the, I guess you could say, base chemicals, or onto a fruit extract, or artificial flavoring, which would be quite an allergen. I've never heard of anyone being allergic to an artificial flavoring, but there again, it is possible, because then again, anything is. Now, any you gentlemen have any questions? I'll be glad to wing it and go for more.
Any questions? From?
No. No.
Thank you for your testimony.
Yeah.
Anyone like to speak next? Come forward.
Hello, Council. I'm Daryl Stewart, and I'd like to talk about my experiences with ECigs. Okay, I've been vaping for 4 years.
What was your first name?
Gerald.
Gerald.
I smoked for 13 years. I tried everything to quit. I was a slave to cigarettes. I tried Zyban, Chantix, the patches, the gum. None of it worked, even cold turkey. And I just kept going back, you know. And eventually I found e-cigarettes 4 years ago. Of course, they've improved since then. They've got the bigger models, you know, that hit much harder. You know, because the ones that look like a cigarette, those were terrible. But, you know, anyway, so they've improved a lot. I agree that studies need to be done as far as long-term, but they have been done short-term. When they say there's no been studies that have been done, that's not true. And you guys can look it up. Dr. Michael Siegel of Boston Medical University reviewed 12 studies. Okay, he's a professor there. And I don't know why this is not mainstream news. And I think that the FDA is one very corrupt agency. They are protecting the drug companies who make the patches, the gum, and the pills. Okay, they tried to ban the e-cigarette, and this is how they did it. December 7th, 2010, they were in court with Judge Richard Leon, and they wanted to change the classification of the e-cigarette to a drug delivery device. This would have completely pulled it off the market, and it would have been illegal to sell it. Okay, but Judge Richard Leon told them you will not label a drug delivery device, and you will stop illegally seizing shipments from China. Okay, they have an agenda. The biggest paying customers of the FDA is the drug companies. They want this out of the way because this is a huge threat to them. There was a survey on the internet about effectiveness of e-cigarettes of people who switch from cigarettes to e-cigarettes from real cigarettes, and it's 80% success rate. That's amazing. Now, when you look at the patches, pills, and gum, at 20 months, 2%, only 2% stayed off cigarettes. So 98%, no wonder I kept going back. 98% of people would go right back to cigarettes. It's a terrible product, but it's $1 billion industry, and they want to protect it. So let's go over some of the concerns. There's some of the things that I can't remember her name, but she had brought up. The 2009 FDA study. To me, it shows how safe it is when you really look into it. Okay, let's go over the first chemical. It was called diethylene glycol. They said it was a product known to be an antifreeze. Okay. What they did not say is that chemical is used to moisturize tobacco. So it's understandable in those 18 studies how it might get some in there. That's why we want regulation for the liquid. I agree with you, sir. I want to know what's in my liquid. Okay, I want the FDA to help out with regulation. And now it appears they're stuck in a corner because Richard Leon told them you can't change it to a drug delivery device. So their only option is to regulate it. So now they're trying to see how they can use that to help out their drug companies. I guarantee they can try to over-regulate. But anyway, diethylene glycol, they didn't say the amount that was found in it. Less than 1%, not toxic to the human body. Water can be toxic to the human body if you drink too much water. Your electrolytes are overloaded and you can die. Okay, anything in a certain amount can be toxic. Less than 1% was not toxic. But that is the fear tactics they use when they make these reports, okay? So they'll say, oh, chemical known to be an antifreeze was found in it, but they didn't say the amount, okay? The carcinogens. The carcinogens found in the e-liquid is also known to be in the patches and the gum. They didn't say that. And in the Nicotrol, their little inhaler device. Gentlemen before me already covered flavorings. They say, oh, marketing to children. I agree. Don't let them. If they're not 18, don't let them buy it. But adults like flavorings. I do. I like caramel. I've already talked about Dr. Michael Siegel. You guys should look him up. He's constantly battling Stanton Glantz, who is completely against e-cigarettes. Those two are always going head-to-head. And Stanton Glantz just used junk science. And every time that he releases an article, Dr. Michael Siegel's all over it. And, you know, I'm all about science-based. If you guys can prove to me, hey, this is bad for me, I will say that, I'm sorry, I don't feel that. I feel way healthier than when I used to smoke. I immediately felt the benefits of being a non-smoker while I'm vaping on an e-cigarette. And secondhand vapor, last night I found a new study that I hadn't seen before. I printed out extra copies for you guys. I've only got 4 copies to give you guys. Can I pass this forward? It talks about a secondhand vapor study. Reviewed over 9,000 different chemicals, saying that not only is it not, harmful to the person who's vaping, but it's not harmful to bystanders. So, and I thought that was a legitimate thing to bring up, since that's what we're talking about, is whether we want to ban it in, like bars or wherever. I think it should be up to the facility owner. I think that's the part of being an American, is having the freedom of choice for business owners to say whether, we can or cannot have that. But also, one more agency is the American Association of Public Health Physicians, saying that this can save lives. Those are nothing but a nonprofit group of doctors who are all about public health. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Stewart. Anyone else like to come forward?
Hello, my name is Michael Magoo. I'm the manager of Stogies Vapor here in Abilene. As a local business operator, I feel the need to speak out against this ban on vaping in public spaces. There are several reasons that I and my colleagues vape and are against the ban. Now, we can all agree that the city is not trying to ban all vaping, okay? But leaving it up to each business, but not leaving it up to each business could be disastrous for the industry itself. The nature of addiction can be a funny thing. Anybody that is addicted to any substance can tell you the addiction to nicotine can be as strong as the most dangerous drugs. And this is where the city's proposed ordinance would be detrimental to the vaping community. By enacting this ban, you are doing more than one thing. You're telling the people that have taken the bold step to try to reduce their nicotine that in order for them to get the nicotine that they need, they must go outside and be reserved to spaces that they need to stay away from to keep from smoking. This would be the same principle as holding a Narcotics Anonymous meeting next door to a meth lab, or an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting physically inside of a bar. When breaking an addiction, the key is to remove yourself physically from the environment that is detrimental to your addiction. The ban on personal vaporizers would perpetuate smoking, not discourage it, which is what we're all trying to do here. For me, this is a personal issue. I started vaping because I didn't want to die from lung cancer or from emphysema. I started smoking in high school, just like everybody else that smokes. And this is what makes it not only a personal issue, but also a public one. When the city categorizes vaping as being the same thing as smoking, it implants the stigma with it as well. Vaping has not normalized smoking cigarettes, like other members here have suggested. The rate of smoking among teenagers has been on a steady decline for well over a decade. Let's go to a study that was done from the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. It covered 1,300 students participating in this study to ask for the reasons they took up vaping. Almost every single one of them took up vaping to quit smoking. Out of the 1,300 students, only 3% had not used nicotine before taking up vaping. And out of all of the 1,300 students, only one student has started smoking. So it just goes to show that e-cigs are not a gateway to anything, much less smoking cigarettes. There is not a single 100% completely safe cessation product out there. But let's be honest, the air we breathe outside is far less safe from air pollution than the secondhand vapor coming out of these vaporizers. If we want to make this an issue for the safety of the public, then we have no choice but to table this silly ban, but to not only table this silly ban, but to encourage vaping as a way to quit, considering it has a much higher success rate than any FDA-approved method. Overall, less people smoking not only saves people's lives, but also saves this city money. We have the opportunity to do both. Less smoking means a healthier, longer-living workforce that can contribute greatly to this amazing city, pay more in taxes, and use less tax dollars in the emergency room and other medical expenses. Isn't that not only what the city wants, but also what the city needs? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. Next.
William Hopkins. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out to speak today. I've been really impressed with the information brought forward, and that shows me that the vaping community is educating themselves on the products that they're purchasing. While I understand the council has concerns and a duty to protect its local citizens, I fear the very thing that you're trying to protect, which is public health, is what you're going to end up hurting. The reason for this is because once you lump in cigarettes and e-cigarettes together, you're telling people that they're the same thing and they represent the same dangers. And that's not true. I also understand that due to the enormous success rate of e-cigarettes as a tool for quitting smoking, this has had an effect on the local hospital cessation programs. So why are people turning to e-cigarettes versus cessation programs? I've heard from many of our customers, including men and women at the Dyess Air Force Base, who have tried quitting with numerous cessation programs and have failed. Chantix, this is one I hear of a lot, particularly from Air Force, because they suffer a resurgence in their PTSD symptoms, suffer from nightmares, depression, anxiety, and thoughts of suicide. There are literally hundreds of suicides from Chantix, just in the USA. And we're trying to put them on to Nicorette gum, but we've heard earlier that this has about a 2. I've read 6% success rate is the best I've read. Chantix is between 6 and 14%. And I've read anywhere from the lowest of 19% of a study on e-cigarettes as a quitting tool, and the highest I've heard is an 80% success rate. I'd like to think that our council is able to independently think about ways to address issues. Of course, it's an easy knee-jerk reaction to say, this looks like a cigarette, there's vapor in the air, that looks like smoke, we should ban it, just like we did cigarettes. However, maybe there's a way to think outside the box. Maybe there's a way to communicate with vapor stores in town. Maybe there's a way that we can work together. Personally, as a business owner in this town in the vaping industry, I would like to be able to help businesses make their own decisions regarding this, and would be willing to provide, at no cost to local businesses, stickers that they can put on the front of their windows displaying that this is an e-cigarette friendly store or a not e-cigarette friendly store. We'd be willing to go on air and advertise a campaign and make our customers aware and work with the city towards this. I think that's a far better solution, and we put you wonderful people here today in your nice suits because you're able to think outside the box and you're able to do things better than just go, this looks like a cigarette, let's ban it, because this is extremely dangerous, and it's irresponsible passing this law because you will be damaging your people's health, you will be deterring them from smoke, you won't be deterring them from smoking cigarettes. I'd like to finish with a story I heard from a customer recently. She was in the local movie theater with her friend who was pregnant. The man in front was using a vaporizer right in front of them. The lady who was pregnant was concerned because she didn't know about e-cigarettes or vapor. So she asked the man in front if he would stop vaping. He replied, "I'm sorry, it's not a real cigarette, but yes, of course I will stop vaping." I think that's a conversation that people can have. I really do. And I think if he was unwilling to stop that and she was concerned, I think management could and would have gotten involved. So why not let businesses make their own choices regarding that? That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you.
Next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hope Doherty, and I'm here with 151 Vapes today. I just have a couple of things to say. I've been working here for almost a year now, and in that time, I've personally witnessed countless numbers of people actually better their lives by quitting smoking, by using e-cigarettes and vaporizers. I've seen people use it for not just that, but also to help them lose weight. I've also seen them use it to help with their lung problems, such as asthma, emphysema, and other things. The reason that I'm here today is just to reiterate a few things that I've heard throughout my fellow vapors behind me. First, I'll just start out with the fact that the cigarettes, they have been long-term studied, and we know that there is over 500 cancer-causing carcinogens in cigarettes. We also do know that they do cause many, many deaths a year. There is no long-term studies in vaping. However, we do know that it is helping people quit smoking, and the fact that it's helping people quit smoking, the fact that it's making people healthier in a way is more than enough reason for me to keep selling them. I'm not here to make money off people. I'm not here to just sell an object. I'm here to actually help people make themselves feel better. I'm here to make them healthier. So before you make an executive decision today, I would just like for you to take into consideration the fact that this is actually making people healthier. And not only that, but it's also helping with the secondhand smoke. Cigarettes, there is secondhand smoke in it. It is bad for children. There's also been studies that it can lead to cancer. It can also lead to making them want to smoke whenever they're older. If you vape instead, then you're not going to be having to worry about vaping in the car and then, you know, your kids smelling that smoke and then eventually like getting cancer or who knows, picking up wanting to smoke eventually whenever they're older. So that's all I ask of you today. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you, Ms. Daugherty.
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen of the City Council, and extend this to the absent gentle lady. I want to take this opportunity to thank...
your name for the record.
Excuse me. My name is James Kameninski, private citizen. I want to take this opportunity to thank the council for taking such a motivated approach in creating policy for Abilene. That's your job, and it's clear you care about it. The question before us is which policy is best. The principle of subsidiarity says problems should be solved at the lowest level possible and the highest level necessary. I believe that any problems before us can be solved at a lower level, below that of government action. The problems can be solved at the level of the individual and the property owner. The vapors I have spoken to respect other people and would stop if asked and leave if asked. They ask if they can vape on other people's property, and they vape unobtrusively. We propose an education program to remind people of vaping etiquette, to reach the small number of rude people causing the problem. Perhaps the main point of disagreement is what should government do when there is not enough information to support a regulation or ban. Some think the government should make the law just in case, with the idea that the vote can be changed when more facts come in. I think we need to step away from the precipice and analyze all proposed actions against the precepts of wise and prudent government. Individuals, the vape shops, and all other players in the free market are a great resource which should not be overlooked. We have constant discussions about who should pay for what, such as sidewalks people want. With the budget workshop coming up, I'm pleased to report that the city does not have to make room for this in the budget. Awesome news. In conclusion, I believe we don't need this regulation because any problems can be solved at a lower level. We don't have enough information to support the regulation, and the city does not have to find room in an already full budget. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next.
I think it's afternoon by now, so good afternoon. My name is Denise Wolf, and there's two things I do every chance I get. I vote and I breathe. I recently went to the Mall of Abilene, and I was walking down the hallway, and I walked through a puff of smoke. I walked a little further, and I went through another puff of smoke. Frankly, I didn't appreciate that. It sets a bad example for our children, and I don't know if this stuff is harmful or not. Nobody else does either. But frankly, I think we need to ban it, put it in with the cigarettes. And someone had been quoted in the newspaper, I don't remember which councilman it was, that if we find out later that it's perfectly harmless, we can always go back. But in the meantime, since we don't know and there aren't enough studies, let's ban it for now. And personally, I'd like to keep it banned, but frankly, I just don't want to breathe someone else's smoke. And if I had a contagious disease or a potentially contagious disease, I could be told to stay home in my house because I could infect someone else. And as long as I've got the floor, and I'm not going to take 5 minutes, I have one other thing to say about smoking anything. If you smoke, you're going to age yourself faster, and when you're my age, you will look my age. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Caleb Weatherford. I'm just an average citizen. I do not use vapors. I do not smoke. I do not think they should be in the restaurants, for one. And I understand that people like to smoke vaporizers. They like to smoke cigarettes. And that's their right as an American. If you want to smoke 10 cigars in an hour, you should be able to do that. I think that's beautiful. But when I'm in Chili's, there's a guy in the booth next to me smoking vaporizers that we don't know what's in it. Simply do not know if it's harmful or not. We have no idea. And my kids are going to breathe it. I don't have kids yet, but I will. Some people do. And just me, myself personally, I have to breathe it. I don't know what's in it. I don't know if it's harmful, and that's my argument. We don't know. I'm more in line with the lady who just spoke that said, if we learn in the future that it is dangerous, we can go ahead and just, if it's harmless, then okay, it's fine, smoke inside. But I understand that for some people, they say, I've heard a lot of arguments today say, I should be able to sell this. I'm going to market it to the right people. I'm going to follow the laws. And I think the question today should be, what about the people who are just walking through the mall, going to Walmart, and are breathing this stuff, saying, what is that? I don't know. And there's pregnant women, there are children, there are elderly. Everyone's wondering what's in this. And I think it'd be irresponsible to say, well, we don't know if it's bad, but let's just go ahead and let it be, and then we'll just, if something bad happens, we'll switch it. I think it's smart to say, okay, let's go ahead and have a designated area to experiment with this and try this risky behavior. And if you want to go ahead and do that, that's your right. And to address the gentleman who said it's the same as asking someone to go to an NA meeting in a meth lab, I disagree with that fully, because if you want to step outside to vape, you can do that you can step away from the smoke, you can go to your car, you can where someone's not smoking, you can see that and then choose to distance yourself and then smoke somewhere else, vape somewhere else. And if that's the case, if seeing somebody smoke is just as tempting as sitting in a meth lab while you're trying to quit meth, then I don't see how any of the vapors who are trying to quit, which I'm all for, I don't see how any of them could even go to Chili's and walk past the people smoking. If that's the case, I think the argument should be, should people even be allowed to smoke outside of Chili's? If it's that great of a temptation, I think we should do away with smoking in public altogether. If that really is true, which I don't believe it is. I'm Caleb Weatherford. I'm just an average citizen. That's all I have to say.
My name is Dale Boker. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. Council members. Thank you for having this. I want to come down firmly on both sides of this issue. Okay. If you are on either side right now, it's not fair to the people on either side to vote. I think we need to talk about this for a while, and the vapors will quit vaping in other people's faces, and the people will make an effort to stay away from vapors if they don't like vapors. Okay. I think there's a lot of personal responsibility, and I don't think we need any more government right now telling us we need to do this or can't do that or need to do this or we don't need to do that. So on the record, I want to be established that I'm firmly on both sides.
Winston Olhausen. I have just one question. Is there fire in this thing? Why is it under?
Sorry, what was your question?
Is there a fire in these e-cigarettes?
No, it's electronic.
Then is it appropriate to do this under the fire prevention code? I'd like to ditto James Kamenetsky's comments, but that's my big thing is it been put in the right area to do this code, change this code to outlaw the e-cigarettes?
Steve Savage.
I don't have a dog in this fight because I don't smoke and I don't vape. But I don't see where it's the council's responsibility to decide for a private business whether to allow it. If there's an issue at the theaters, people vaping, that theater should have a policy and their management should handle it. Same with the private restaurants. I see that this could be a positive thing if it's helping people quit smoking. I don't know because I've never used it. If it's really about public safety, about being targeted at kids, at what point are we going to ban parents from buying their kids Trans Ams, Corvettes, and Camaros and giving them cell phones to text on while they're driving 100 down Buffalo Gap Road? Because I have not ever heard of one study that said that what these people are doing is killing people, but we know for a fact texting and driving is. But yet, kids that are 15 can drive a car with 400 horsepower. But there's no law against it. It's a judgment thing. So I guess what I would ask is for the council to allow businesses and people to be able to act as Americans and use their good judgment. Sure, there may be some people that are doing it in public and it seems obnoxious. I could see that. Right now you have a current smoking ordinance that bans smoking in certain public areas, parks, 20 foot from an entry door. And the fact that you have that ordinance doesn't mean that's how it goes down. And about a year ago, Chief Standard stood here and said he was questioned by K-Texas News, I believe, about the smoking ordinance as it currently was. And I believe he said that they didn't have time to enforce it because they have bigger fish to fry. And that's true. I don't want my police department worrying about if somebody's within 20 foot of an entry door smoking a Marlboro. I don't care about that. I heard some comments made about certain things that just, I'm neutral on this. I heard the comment made that this stuff's made in China. Well, if we're going to go after products made in China, I guess instead of inviting the new Walmart to come in, we need to be closing down the other two. And then, I believe Dr. Norton said, if I heard him correctly, he said the carcinogen level was one one thousandth of what it is in cigarettes. So to me, that sounds like a pretty safe bet. That's a tiny percentage. I think what I'd like to see y'all do, I heard the mayor make the comment about we don't want to be here till midnight or 10 o'clock, and I'm sure that y'all agree. Everybody's got lives to pursue, your businesses and other things. If you weren't even talking about restrictions on something like this, which you shouldn't be, you'd have more time to talk about how you're going to fund the streets department, or how we're going to give that extra money to the police department to buy more ammunition for training, or fixing the roofs on the fire station, or critical infrastructure, or how we're going to get those people trained on that lead abatement. This kind of stuff right here that takes up more of your day is brought upon yourselves for putting it on the agenda. That's all I have.
Hi, my name is Kelly Brazel. I'm so nervous. My heart is beating so fast inside my chest right now. My job right now is a drug and alcohol prevention specialist with Serenity House. There's a youth impact program, so we go to public schools and we talk to the kids about preventive tactics. We talk about goal setting, decision making, and handling your emotions to help the kids become aware of the pressures of life, so that they can have preventive skills to quit or to not use addictive substances. Well, nicotine is the addictive substance in cigarettes. And what I've been confused about the whole time as we've been going through this discussion is that the people have come up here and said that they've used e-cigarettes to quit smoking, but yet they continue to vape using e-cigs. And there's nicotine in e-cigs, so they haven't necessarily quit because they're still addicted to nicotine. And so that's what I get confused about. They're still addicted to a drug, and they're continuing to use it. And the second thing that I'm like passionate about is I love that we have freedoms here in America. And I just feel that when I go into a public place and there's someone vaping in that room, that my freedoms are being restricted because I'm there trying to enjoy my experience at a restaurant or a cafe, and someone's vaping there, and I have to breathe in whatever the substance is that's being released into the air. And so I feel like, well, I guess I should just stay home if I just want to breathe clean air. I can't go out. I was just at Mesame's on Monday, and someone was vaping at Mesame's. And I'm just sitting there and watching this, and I'm like trying to enjoy the open mic night. And I just feel like, well, shoot, I have to breathe in this vapor even when I don't want to, and so it's restricting. When someone's smoking outside on the street, I'm one of those people that holds my breath and like plugs my nose and walks by because I don't want to have to breathe it. But we can't restrict someone when they're outside, and I understand that. But we can restrict them if they're inside, and that's the air that we all have to breathe together. So that's my view on the whole situation, is I want to have the freedom to breathe clean air, and I want to be able to enjoy experiences. I want to be able to go to a bowling alley and bowl and score a perfect score and breathe the clean air that we have there. So that's my stance on the view, or on the procedure. But thank you so much for your time.
Hello again. My name's Jim Pickens. 36 years ago, my wife and I chose to come to Abilene, Texas. We were going to retire here, live our lives here, die here from natural causes, hopefully, be buried here. And the reason why was Abilene was a city that exemplified the Texas spirit. The spirit of Texas built from 1836 to the present day. People like Stephen F. Austin. People like General Sam Houston. People like my great-grandfather who fought at the Battle of San Jacinto. We came here for that reason, and we loved it. We could live our lives according to the rights which God has given us, without encumbrance, without intrusion, and we loved it. But folks, I will just tell you, in my 36 years here, I have seen a significant change in the way that Abilene operates. Abilene has become a nanny city, one which I would like to compare it with Mayor Bloomberg of New York City, but he's out. We have not had a change, okay? So I know individually, each one of you on this council, I know you personally. I've talked to you often. Individually, the bureaucrats within our city staff are great people. But if you go back in the history of the way bureaucracies work, they have one function, and that is to restrict the rights of the individuals in their jurisdiction. I don't want that to happen to me. When I die, I want to be able to die and be buried in my backyard, but no, I can't do that because we have city regulations and all this other kind of stuff. Grind me up and feed me to my cat or something like that. But what the circumstance we have now, folks, is nannification. And as my friend Steve Savage said, you've got better things to do with your time. The staff has better things to do with its time. Instead of searching for a problem, that they can solve, why don't they spend it on the problems which we have? You see, we don't have a problem here. We've created one. And my time is almost up, and I'll watch this, Mayor. Let me read what a constitutional scholar has written. In the face of a government bureaucracy consumed with churning out laws, statutes, codes, and regulations that reinforce its power and value systems and those of the police state and its corporate allies, we are all petty criminals, guilty of violating some minor law. In fact, the average American now unknowingly commits 3 felonies a day. And why are we lawbreakers? Because of you as a group, our city staff as a group. That's why. So I will live the remaining part of my life. I will be buried in Buffalo Gap. And all I say is, God bless Abilene the way it was 36 years ago.
I'm going to announce that at this time we're going to take about a 5 to 8 minute break, and we will conclude. We will come back to this item. So we're going to take a break right now.
Stick down to my.
Yeah, the one that I responded to you.
Oh.
Okay, we resume our public hearing. We'll continue to go on, and whoever would like to speak next, if you'll come forward to the microphone.
Morning, Councilman. My name is Lance Elam. Average citizen. I don't work for a vapor store, lounge, or anything. I'm just coming here, heard testimonies from both sides. I am a vapor. I've heard a lot of the naysayers that are saying, you know, our rights, we don't have to be subject to this if we go out into public. Correct, you don't. I heard a lady state that she was at Mezzamese, and there was a lot of vaping going on. She wanted to enjoy open mic night. That's her choice to be at that establishment, okay? She knows that it's going to be a vapor-filled establishment, and it's her choice to go. So, you know, her right was flexed. She enabled her right to go there knowing it was going to be there. Doctors, studies, things have said that these things are bad. Let me ask you this. You have a small infant, a child. They have a respiratory infection. I'm sure Doc can attest to this. They'll prescribe that you get a Vicks Vapor Rub machine, a humidifier. Put it in the room with the child. Put chemicals in the Vicks Vapor Rub machine. Allow your child to breathe these chemicals to help them. Those are more dangerous than these. They have a lot more chemicals. A lot. These only have 4. Okay? As well as, you know, going to a public place, you're going through a cloud of vapor. Okay? You can go to a concert. There's smoke machines. It's the exact same thing. These are personal smoke machines. That's all they do. You can get them without nicotine in them. A lot of people, they cut down their nicotine levels little by little, just until it's nothing. And then it's their choice to continue vaping because they like the sensation of vapor or smoke filling their lungs. Okay? So if you get rid of personal vaporizers, then you need to ban also smoke machines at any public event. Any of these big concerts, you know, I was doing security. I was Willie Nelson's security guard when he came to town last November. And there were smoke machines everywhere. And I was breathing that in. And, okay, Civic Center was packed. And all these people were willing to be there, paid money to go there, breathing in this vapor, which is basically the exact same thing that's in these personal vaporizers, only it didn't have nicotine in it. You could theoretically put nicotine in a smoke machine and have the exact same effect as these personal vaporizers. I don't have much else to touch on other than, you know, our rights and other people's rights to do what they want to do. It's their choice to be in the same area. If you ban us from being in those areas, you're just taking one side and not the other. If you could just look at it as a whole, no, it's not judgmental to anybody's health. You know, again, the Vicks Vapor Rub machine. Just kind of keep that in your mind. And the nicotine, anything that's exhaled for these people that do have nicotine in their vaporizers, think about it this way. What did I just do? I've breathed in oxygen and released carbon dioxide. So what happens when I breathe in nicotine and then exhale vapor? All the nicotine is instantly absorbed by my lungs and the linings and the capillaries inside of them, and I exhale water vapor. If there is any nicotine or any carcinogenics, if there are none inside of vapor, it is so minuscule that ppm is safer than the water we drink that has defecate, human excrete, in the water that we drink. The ppm, the parts per million, are less for anything hard, nicotine or anything. And I'm going to cut it short right there and just leave it at that. I thank you for your time.
Next.
Hi, my name is Catherine Hicks. I am a regular Abilene citizen. I happen to be the daughter of a Hardin-Simmons professor and the wife of an airman at Dias. And I am a retail worker at Stogies Vapor of Abilene. And I thank you for the opportunity to appeal to you guys today and tell you why and what my opinions are. The first thing that I would like to touch on is something that one of your councilmen mentioned earlier in this meeting, he talked about that his bottles that he purchased say may contain nicotine, even though there's 0 nicotine products. If you look at the cookie wrapper when you buy a cookie for your child, it's going to say may contain nuts, whether it has nuts in it or not. Because the factory in which it is made does contain products that are made with nuts. If you buy a chocolate bar from Hershey, they can have so many pieces of bugs in them legally and perfectly fine. Honestly, I would rather breathe something into my lungs that has 1/1000th of the chemical products that a cigarette has than eat a chocolate bar with cricket legs in it. And I feel that it is my right as a citizen of Abilene to do so knowing that I have educated myself and others have the ability to educate themselves on what it is that I am doing, either by asking me or going to the internet for research or watching any of the local news that have been covering vaporizers lately. I would also like to mention something that has been kind of strangely lacking from the discussion. When people switch to an e-cigarette, to a vaporizer, to whatever you want to call it, they have the ability to step down their nicotine use. So others have mentioned on the opposing side of this argument that when you purchase a vaporizer, you're not stopping an addiction to nicotine, you're just switching to another source of it. This is partially untrue, due to the fact that when most of my customers come to see me, I ask them how much they smoke, what brand they smoke, and if that's the really, real most that they're going to smoke in a day. When they've answered these questions for me, I almost literally prescribe them a nicotine level that would be good to start, and we work on a week-by-week plan on how they can get down to 0 nicotine in the fastest, most efficient way for them without causing stress on their body. These ingredients, propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, have been used in asthma inhalers and hospital filtration systems since the 70s. If you're telling me that asthma inhalers and hospital filtration systems are unsafe, why are we not banning those? Why are we not banning the 2 smoking cessation products that the FDA has approved that contain all of these ingredients? Why is it just commercially sold vaporizers? You cannot ban what you don't understand only because you do not understand it. The first thing that was said in this meeting today was when the child was brought up to lead in the Pledge of Allegiance. And we talked about that Abilene has a future, and its future are the children. I would much rather have children grow up in a world where their parents start vaping around them safely than a world like where my father grew up and contracted cancer in his nasal passage and lost an eye and part of his brain pan to this because his parents smoked in his house with him. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I meant to make a point, take 20 seconds.
Okay.
I really meant to make it, and I forgot about it. A female had spoke up here about walking through
the microphone, so this is recorded.
Okay. She said something about walking through the mall and or being inside an inside environment and then smelling the odors of the vapor or whatever. And I could see where you could be in an inside environment and you'll smell something more than you would outside, and that's where her position would be okay outside but not inside. I'd just like to point out for the record, and this isn't really a fair analogy, but I notice a lot of females in here with painted toenails. They have open-toe shoes on. And every time I walk in through the mall by Best Buy, come out by where Books A Million is, there's a nail place there. I smell all that acetone, but I've never asked y'all to ban that store from being open or any of the hairdo places that are spraying all that mousse or whatever it is they have. And this is not an attack on them, but I'm saying that every one of you have gone to the mall with your wives or whatever, and you've been subject to odors in the air, but we just live with it. As good citizens, we just live with it. It's just whatever. So I'm just throwing that out there. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander.
Would anyone else like to speak?
My name is Steve Succi. I work for a medical doctor, and the points have been made repeatedly on the documentation how this is not a public health hazard. The point that I would like to make is that you all seem to be willing to make a decision with no basis. It's not to vape or not to vape. It's the fact that we have enough government control from the federal and state level. We don't need our local levels to start restricting us also. again, it's not whether to vape or not to vape. I don't care. It's and the points have been addressed also about other odors from air fresheners, anything. The smoke from the fajitas and chilies. You're going to ban that because that's known carcinogens. I mean, that is proven known carcinogens. Well, we all breathe that. So again, my point is the interference of even something as simple as our local government on making a decision that has no scientific basis.
Would anyone else like to speak?
Mayor and councilman, several of you...
Can you state your name for the record?
Oh, sorry, Ralph McCluskey. I've practiced cardiology here in Abilene for 38 years. 8 years ago, I last appeared before you to speak in favor of the smoking ban. At that time, I was able to bring to you specific medical data of over 60 years worth of research regarding the effect of secondhand smoke on the non-smoking population. Now, with the e-cigarettes, there is no issue of secondhand smoke because they're not ignited and the smoke doesn't come off unless a person inhales. So that is not an issue. There is, however, contrary to what you've heard, considerable medical data regarding the effects of vaping. Now, when a person, assuming that a e-cigarette that has the maximum nicotine in it, when a person inhales that, it creates a nicotine aerosol, and approximately 80% of that is retained in the lungs. About 20% of that aerosol is exhaled. There's exquisite medical detail looking at the consequence of this 20% being exhaled. For example, and this specific study has been done in a room this size with the doors closed. If half the people are not smoking and half the people are vaping, in approximately 2 hours, if you check blood levels of nicotine, you'll find that they are the same, that the vapors have the same level of nicotine as the non-smokers. So clearly, vaping has an effect on the non-smoking population. And in addition to the nicotine, you've heard a lot about the propylene glycol. The propylene glycol that we're concerned about is the vaporized glycol, not the glycol that you can ingest. When it is vaporized as a mist, it is very irritating both to lungs and eyes, and Dow Chemical, who makes propylene glycol, advises against inhaling their product. Also, with the heaters that are used in the e-cigarettes, as the propylene glycol passes through those, there is significant heavy metal contamination of the smoke. And we're talking about things like cadmium and chromium, nickel, copper, even tin from solder in the joints. And this heavy metal contamination is not present in regular cigarettes because there is no metal in them. And when in the vapor, it just turns out that as it vaporizes, the particle size is exactly the size that will pass through the lungs into the smaller and smaller breathing areas until it reaches where the vascular supply is, and it can go directly into the bloodstream. And that is particularly dangerous to non-smokers with cardiovascular disease because exposure to nicotine, even in very minuscule amounts, is very dangerous, particularly in our current population that has intervention with stents and bypass surgery. And finally, these particles carry with them the flavors. And the data that this causes cancer is just not there, but we don't have enough experience to know. There is suggestion that the flavors can affect stem cells, which would make it very, very dangerous for pregnant women to inhale the vapor. So my recommendation is to approve the proposed ordinance changes. Thank you.
Can I ask the doctor a question, and I promise I'll be nice? I promise I'll be nice.
Please.
And you may not have the answer to this, but this was a question I have. Propylene glycol is used in fog machines, correct? Is that?
The recommendation of the American Chemistry Council is that it not be used in fog machines.
Okay, but it is. I think it is. And one of the arguments against this is that if it's in the fog machines and it's in the vaping, okay, why can't we use both? Do you happen to know, and this is a question, what percentage? If in a fog machine it's only 3% propylene glycol that's being dispersed versus something like this that has 40% of it is the propylene glycol. So to say that it's in, do you see my question? To say that it's in one thing and it's in another, so it must be safe in both, I would like to know, and you may not have this information, but if in a fog machine, it's only this much percentage compared to water and compared to other things, yet in this, it's this much percentage, then that's not really comparing apples to apples, because you're saying, there's a little bit of it here, but there's a lot more of it here. It's the same ingredient. But if it's more concentrated and it's more prevalent in this as opposed to fog machine, as a medical, I don't even know if you have the answer to that. You don't?
That's out of my realm of
Okay,
expertise. I can't address that.
Okay. That's just a question I had for the percentages of that. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. McCluskey.
You have the answer to that if you would like to know.
Just if you would come, just to answer the question.
The answer to your question is a fog machine contains 99% propylene glycol.
Okay.
And personal vaporizers, e-liquid, usually contains between 30 and 40, 50% propylene glycol. So it's actually less.
Okay. Thank you.
As for the wires, saying, what was it, nickel and copper and things of those, things of that nature. On this, there is one type of wire. There's Kanthal, and then there's another type, which is steel mesh. The steel mesh is wrapped around this tiny Kanthal wire to deliver a better flavor, stronger flavor. And the other wire, which is just purely Kanthal on its own, just heats it up, causes a cloud. There's no way you could use copper, especially copper. Reasoning being is it's a very poisonous metal to heat up. I own half of a company with my father, and we have slush machines, and if you solder on a copper line for Freon, you have to wear a breather mask on top of welder goggles, because if you breathe in the smoke that actually comes off of that, it's highly toxic. So there's no way to use copper. If there are people out there doing that, they're not very brilliant. But anyways, there's only a couple wires that you can use, and there's not going to be any lethal ones in there, I can assure you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak for or against this? If you'll come forward, state your name for the record.
My name's Corey Nixon. I don't live in Abilene. I live in Clyde, and this directly affects me because I make almost daily trips to Abilene as it is. This is from Minnesota Vapors Advocacy. The EPA and the FDA have found vapor harmless to children. In continued war on e-cigarettes, we hear about the potential dangers of e-cigarettes, vapor, and the unknown public risk. First, I find absolutely absurd that we're attempting to pass laws based on unknowns, but we make it even more absurd in the fact that where very little isn't known about e-cigarette vapor at this point. The primary ingredient of concern to those who wish to see e-cigarettes banned is propylene glycol vapor, which has been studied for over 70 years, and recently came across a document titled Re-Registration Eligibility Decision for Propylene Glycol and Dipropylene Glycol, which was created by the United States Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. Catchy title, I was intrigued. The quote caught my eye. Propylene glycol and dipropylene glycol were first registered in 1950 and 1959 respectively by the EPA for use in hospitals as an air disinfectant. In previous posts, I had shared a summary of research that had been done in 1942 by Dr. Robinson regarding the antibacterial properties of vaporized propylene glycol, but I had never heard the FDA wound up approving it for the purpose of an air disinfectant in hospitals. Indoor non-food propylene glycol is used on the following use sites: air treatment, eating establishments, hospitals, commercials, institutional, household, bathroom, transportational facilities, medical premise and equipment, commercial institutes and industrial premise and equipment. Page 6, paragraph 2 of that article. Continued. Method and rates of application. Air sanitizer. Read the directions included with the automatic dispenser of proper installation of unit and refill. Remove cap from aerosol can and place in a sequential aerosol dispenser which automatically releases a metered amount every 15 minutes. One unit treats 6,000 feet of closed airspace for regular non-metered applications. Spray room until a light fog forms. To sanitize the air, spray 6 to 8 seconds in an average size room, 10 by 10. Page 6, paragraph 6. A common argument used to support the public usage ban is that, this is in Minnesota, so Minnesotans have become accustomed to the standard of clean air, indoor air. However, according to the EPA and FDA, for so long as there is a light fog of propylene vapor in the air is actually more clean than the standard that they have been accustomed to. General toxicity observations. Upon reviewing the available toxicity information, the agency has concluded that there are no endpoints of concerns for oral, dermal, or inhalation exposure to propylene glycol and dipropylene glycol. The conclusion is based on the results of the toxicity testing of propylene glycol and dipropylene glycol, in which doses levels near or above testing limits as established by the OPPTS 870 series harmonized test guidelines were employed in experimental animal studies and no significant toxicity observed. Carcinogenicity classification. A review of the available data has shown propylene glycol and dipropylene glycol to be negative for carcinogenicity in studies conducted up to the testing limit doses established by the agency. Therefore, no carcinogenic analysis is required. Page 10, paragraph 1 and 2. There's more to that article.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Would anyone else like to speak for or against this item? Come forward and state your name for the record. No, you had your time. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I mean.
So I can't come up there twice?
No, we're not.
Okay. Just check.
Would anyone else like to speak for or against? If you've already spoken, then you've.
Just a real quick thing. Just real fast. Okay. Sorry, but I would just like to point out the simple fact that a few minutes ago, whenever we all took a break, I don't know if you noticed, but not a single one of us vaped in the building, and that's because we have respect for everyone here that does not like to vape, that does not like to breathe it. So I do believe that before y'all make an executive decision, we need to take into consideration that we can do this together just out of respect for each other and out of common courtesy. I don't feel like this needs to have a regulation on it, especially since we don't have enough backup evidence to prove it. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak for or against? Okay, at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing. We have, according to this, 20 different individuals have spoken, and I do appreciate everyone bringing this discussion or their thoughts. That's why we have public hearings, to allow for people to have their input into these. I think we've looked at, if you go back and look at the ordinance, I reflect back on what we did for smoking. When we enacted that ban in November, I believe it was November, well, we brought it before the voters. The city voted on this, not the council only voted to put it on the ballot.
The city didn't vote on it. It was a non-voting deal. They
Non-binding. It wasn't non-voting.
It was a referendum, but the citizens of Abilene did vote on that referendum about a smoking ban in place in our city, which included restaurants, bars, bowling alleys, bingo halls, the public workplace, and the ordinance about being within a certain distance of the opening of buildings in the city. And the people, it was a chance for people to express their own desires. I believe the total outcome of that vote was there was 70%, almost 70% of the people voted in favor of a ban. What's been interesting to me is that when I think about today, restaurants, just taking restaurants alone, that when you go into a restaurant, you know that you can enjoy a meal without having to, even if you're in non-smoking, smoking zones, that you were near a smoking zone and all of the smell of cigarette smoke came over while you were trying to enjoy your meal. Or going to a bowling alley and a lot of children wanting to go and the bowling alley is kind of, I'll say, filled with smoke. And so it seemed for most people, at least 70% of the people of the city, that they would like to live in a smoke-free environment, and they were basing it on secondhand smoke. And what's been really interesting, I think, when people have taken it for granted in our city today, that you can go into a restaurant or a bowling alley and go and have a meal or bowl a game and not have to smell that. It's interesting when people come back and tell me that they were in such a city and they went into a restaurant thinking it's like the restaurants back home where you don't have to put up with smoke, only to know that there were people smoking, and it was kind of, I said, well, in that case, we've kind of taken it for granted that we have that protection in our city. So this is coming along, coming to the same point of talking about the effects of the e-cigarettes, and the questions that have been raised today have been those of, are there dangers in the vapors that are going out? This has not been regulated by the FDA. I think we would be safe to say that there's, Dan, would you say there's still ongoing studies that the FDA is doing? I would not know that we would know the outcome of those. But the question is, what do we do between now and the time? Because if the FDA did come out and say there were health concerns or secondhand vapor hazards then I think this would be not a non-issue, but it would be deciding issue. If they came out and said they're safe, there's not a problem with that, I think we would have to say we would go along with what the FDA has done. But at this point, there are not those conclusive studies as to the effect of this. One of the things in all of these discussions, whether it be a smoking ban or an e-cigarette ban, is we have not outlawed smoking in Abilene. We've only outlawed it in public places like restaurants, bars, bingo halls, and bowling alleys, and the workplace. This is like this, and it does not. I mean, I'm very glad to know that people have quit smoking by going to an e-cigarette. I think that's good. If that helps that going on, I think that's good. But at the same time, what happens when you're out in a public place and the people are next door? And whether that be like in a movie theater, someone mentioned a movie theater situation. I don't know that I would enjoy watching a movie if all of the vapors were coming up if it was the person right in front of me. I'm telling you honestly, I don't think I would enjoy the movie, or if they had a smell to them, or that maybe I didn't like being in a closed space like that is not something I want to enjoy doing. So you've got two sides. The person that says, well, you know if you go to the movie theater, there's going to be that. Well, if that's the case, there are a lot of people who won't be going to movie theaters.
That's their choice. Can you ask them to refrain from wearing perfumes and colognes as well?
Okay. We've had the public hearing, and you've had a chance to speak. So we're discussing what takes place in public places, like the ban that we had on smoking cigarettes in public places. I don't have any problems with the underage 18 group at all. I think there are some regulations that need to be put in place. I think young people are vulnerable to trends. They're vulnerable to things that they want to start experimenting with, whether it be smoking or other things that they're trying to, more than anything else, kind of fit into society and be acceptable in those ways. But the real question that we're really looking at is the ban as it relates to public places. Because we're not banning e-cigarettes from our community. I mean, people can buy them and they can smoke them, but we're talking about being in public places and the effect on other people. A lot of our, when I think about all of our public health laws, as was mentioned the other day, when you go into a restaurant, you have to expect that they're cooking the meals in accordance with acceptable standards so that people won't get sick, that they won't have outbreaks of salmonella poisoning or uncooked foods or that. Or the same thing with our drinking water, that when you go out into the hallway and you go to the water fountain, that you know that is good, clean, treated water, that it doesn't have side effects that would make people sick. And those are the kind of public laws that we deal with every day, and we do that for the public safety and the public health of all of our citizens. So this is another area in which we find ourselves coming to understand. I will admit, I realize that there are not conclusive studies in doing this, which concerns me that, as people have said, are you overreacting? Are you acting prematurely? Wait to see if there's going to be some studies come out. That's one of the things I think we've got to look at, how that affects that. Well, I've said how I see this all playing out and what we've heard today. I'm going to open it up to the council and ask y'all if y'all have any thoughts or questions.
Well, I do, so I'll hit a few of these. I did some research real quickly. According to Canada Vapes, which is just a vaping site, most vaping fluids contain 80 to 92% propylene glycol. Okay, I'm just saying that's what I found. Whereas, in order to make a fog machine, a good fog machine is 30% propylene glycol to 70% water. Okay, you said fog machines were 99% propylene and glycol, and cigarettes were only 40 to 50. So I'm just saying. Okay, that's what it says here. An argument is that if people go into a place and they don't like the vaping, they can leave. Well, and you just said, someone just said, if there's a smell of perfume, that offends me. Well, you can leave too. I mean, if you walk into a place, if you can walk into a place, I'm just saying. I mean, if you're going to make that argument, that's the other side.
We have had a public hearing, and I'm asking that the members of the council be able to express their opinions now. So please be respectful of that as they were when you were at the podium, please.
I was. He had his full 5 minutes to speak, and I asked him questions. You guys say that these are smoking cessation. This says right here, this product is not an aid for smoking cessation. It's printed on the label that is not an aid for smoking cessation. Now, where did that juice come from? Made in America. I don't know. It came from what store? Yes, that's what I'm inquiring. It came from a store actually in Texarkana, Arkansas. Okay, yes, yeah. From discountvapors.com. It may be safer. We do not know for sure. There are not enough studies on it, and this is why we vendors are not allowed to claim it is a safe alternative. Vendors are not allowed to claim that it's a safe alternative because you don't know. Don't know. The mayor pointed this out. This ban will not prevent people from vaping. Okay, we had the smoking ordinance. People still smoke. Someone said that this ban could be disastrous to the vaping industry. I don't think that the smoking ordinance was disastrous to the smoking industry, to the smoking businesses. They still exist in this area. We are not banning this because it looks like smoke. That's not the reason we're banning it. We're banning it because we don't know what's in it. And people have a right, have no idea what's in that. Have no idea what's in that. It's not on the label. Yeah. Well, yeah, sure.
No, please sit down.
Well, I'm just saying.
Kyle, we're not trying to enter into
a
debate.
I'm just saying.
I want you to express your opinions to the council.
Okay. Those are my concerns right there, is that we do not have enough information. And if we do not act now and we find out later that it's dangerous, then we have done a disservice to our citizens. We have done a disservice to the city. Because we have an opportunity to say, we don't know what's in this stuff. And we don't know what's in this stuff. And so I think it's important for us to make that decision. Because we don't know what's in this stuff. We don't know what's involved in it. And we don't know the health effects of it. We don't know what the vapors coming out mean. We don't know any of that. And that's the danger of it.
We don't know what's in the dark, but
I agree with some of what Kyle is saying, but I'm inclined to sort of come down on the other side of it and suggest to the council that perhaps we alter the language as such to pass the age restriction and hold off on the public restrictions until more information. And I would just put that to the members of the council, and I'd like to hear what you guys think about that.
I'm going to let others speak.
Well, this has certainly been a very interesting council meeting this morning. Got to pontificate alternate forms of cat food and even some cricket legs and chocolate. And so, several years ago when we put forth the smoking ordinance, I was supportive of that, like many Abilenians were. The challenge I have with this is that I'm not convinced that it has significant secondhand issues. And because of that, I'm inclined to support Jay's recommendation. I do think that it would, I think it would be far-fetched to argue that minors should be buying what is unknown. But I concur with you, Jay, and look forward to additional information about e-cigs and what it may and what effects it may impose on those. So,
I'm of the same opinion. I've got to admit that when I walked in here this morning, I kind of thought this was going to happen. But what affected me was the testimony from our medical group or medical person, and again, I'm not convinced. Now, I do agree with the 18-year-old rule, but I want to say a lot of the arguments that were given today were like we were banning it completely. It's not a ban. In order to, some people were suggesting that you leave it up to the businesses. Well, maybe in this case we may do that, but I can tell you as a person who has his pulse on everyday people, because they're across my counter every day, I will raise this issue again if the vapors out there start to disrespect the people that don't want the vape, especially in movie houses, restaurants. So you made a promise today. I think I heard you make a promise today that you're going to cooperate with the public. So on that basis, and the basis that we are not conclusive with the evidence, I would support Councilman Hardaway's decision, recommendation.
Shane?
I see that this is two issues. One is the minors, and I agree as well that this does not belong in their hands. I have two kids in high school that I've got two that are out of high school, two still in high school, and I talked to some teachers and said, is there any e-cigarettes, vaping at Abilene High where they go? And they said, oh, yes, enough that they had a faculty meeting to discuss it, because since it's not, there's not an ordinance or anything banning it for minors, and there's no district policy against it, they are using it freely on campus. And I think that's inappropriate. I don't think that needs to continue. The other is the decision of who makes a decision with regards to if vaping's allowed. And I believe that the property owner, the person responsible for the business or property, needs to make that decision. I would go, though, a little bit askew from what's been discussed at this point and say that as the people representing the voters and the taxpayers, that we are the ones that set the policy for city facilities. And I would like to see us discuss the potential or possibility of having a restriction against using it like City Hall, at the Civic Center, places that are enclosed, because that's a decision for us to make as stewards of the taxpayers' property. And so I would support as well what Councilman Hardaway said, but would like to have a discussion about some restrictions at city-owned facilities.
Mayor, I want to add one more comment about the businesses controlling. Now, I said that you guys have made us a promise, but you got to understand that a businessman like myself, who owned a restaurant for 20 years, very hard for a business person to walk up to a customer and say, I don't want you to do that, because he has the risk of alienating that customer going to the next store. So that's why I'm saying, you guys made this promise. We expect you to keep it. So you have the customers firsthand. Please tell them what we talked about today, and to be mindful of who the people are around them in restaurants and in movie houses or wherever. So that's all I have to say.
Also, on that note, there is signage available on the internet as well as from different places like Granger.com. There's a lot of different places that you can buy signage that basically rules out e-cigarettes as used in your establishment. You can also have a sign company make those personally for you.
Let me follow up by saying that I think every one of us is fully aware of the impact of decisions that we make on the citizenry, including everything from the budget to speed limits to where you can build a building, where you can build a Walmart, where you can't build a Walmart, where we have sidewalks, how far your house is set back from the curb, et cetera, et cetera. So we realize that's the business that we're in. It has occurred to me through all this discussion that in the 1990s, before any of us were on the city council took up a smoking ban in Abilene and tabled it. They tabled it for years, okay? Then in 2004, in the spring of 2004, and I guess, Anthony, you and I were the only one on that council, we had a proposed smoking ban. We had to meet at the Civic Center because of all of the number of people that we knew would come. I think I remember that day vividly. There were 83 people that spoke, and it was quite a lengthy meeting. It was a lot of people on both sides of the issue. People saying we don't want to have to smell all of the secondhand smoke. Health issues were related, but freedom and liberty issues were brought up as well. It was tabled at that time in 2004. In the fall of 2006, it was taken up again, and when that took place, it was passed. That's when it was taken to the voters for the referendum to support a ban, and about almost 70% of the people supported the referendum, and it was enacted in January of 2007. I realize that rules or regulations can be flexible, movable, fluid, or however you want to look at it from the standpoint of what's decided or not decided today could be changed in the future if there were other studies and or results of indications that would show to the contrary based on scientific research, medical research, or at such time that the state of Texas, who would have jurisdiction over municipalities, and or the federal government were to pass something that we would have to comply with because we are a municipality. I will concur and I appreciate Councilman Holloway bringing this up to begin the discussion, and that I think at this time, based on what we have, I think we are at an advantage to sit back and table the discussion of the use of e-cigarettes in public places. That doesn't prohibit it from today saying that we would pass the prohibition of e-cigarettes being sold to minors and also the possession, purchase, and consumption of e-cigarettes by minors as well. And I think, but that does not preclude that 6 months from now, this would be back on an agenda or at some point in the future, because I think that's something that needs to continue to be monitored, very similar to how we had tabled bans before, but yet had not enacted them until we did in 2006. Now, Council, based on all that you have heard, is there still some further discussion?
Mayor, I have a question regarding Councilman Price's suggestion on city-owned facilities. And normally that would solely just be a policy decision that the city manager can make, except that this chapter does contain a provision that extends the chapter to city-owned facilities. So it would be appropriate if that's the council's desire, we could add language in section 1086 that expanded the definition of smoking only in city-owned facilities to include e-cigarettes.
But you're saying to specify that it would be only in...
Because we have a section that applies this entire chapter to city-owned facilities. It's in your packet. It's section 1086. It would just add that to the definition, but only in facilities owned by the city of Abilene.
And those facilities would include, for instance, City Hall, the Law Enforcement Center, the Civic Center, the Housing Department, public libraries. I mean, that's a
City parks.
City parks. I'm just saying.
And my focus is more on the building facilities. Not the outdoor facilities.
You mentioned Abilene High, isn't that, do we do that, or is the school?
No,
board
but
do
the
that?
minors would address
Oh,
that.
minors.
And I would encourage the school board for both Wiley and Abilene to consider things.
I could see.
For the,
I could
but
see.
but
has banned it on their school campuses. Abilene ISD, I believe it was about 2 or 3 months ago, banned e-cigarettes.
okay. But I'm more. I guess my focus is more on the building facilities, not.
And
not,
I would concur
not
with
the
that.
parks, not the outdoor
not parks,
locations.
If that is outdoors. I mean, you could confine it to a building, correct?
Well, in that situation, the city manager has that authority as it is, in my opinion.
Okay.
We're talking about.
So there's not need to put that in the
We don't need
ordinance.
to put that in the ordinance.
Okay.
Otherwise, it gets really broad.
Right.
Okay. Any other discussions, points?
I don't see Jimmy Pickens here. I just want him to know that we did listen to the people today.
He may be in Buffalo Gap.
I was about to say, there's cat maybe.
He said his cat was hungry.
For the record, I'm gonna introduce a motion that the city council table the ordinance amending the codes that would ban e-cigarettes in public places, I'm going to say to mirror the smoking ban that is in existence today. But in also doing, by putting the ban on the smoking in public, that we do enact a ban on the sale of e-cigarettes to minors under the age of 18, and also that both the possession, the purchase, and consumption of e-cigarettes by minors is prohibited in the city. And I think, and the question of the vendor-assisted sales are required for e-cigarettes, would that also be?
That goes with, yes, that's because of the minors.
That would be the third component of how it affects minors, correct?
Correct.
Would that need to be in two? One, to table the ban, secondly, to adopt?
If I might, my recommendation would be that avoid the tabling language. You're just approving the ordinance as it relates to minors, and you're not approving any of the provisions that are applied to using it in public places. Yes. So you're approving the changes with regards to minors, sales to minors, use by minors, possession by minors. And in your ordinance, that's section 1093, 1094, and 1095.
But is the tabling of it, Dan, allow us to say that we heard the discussion, we have chosen not to do that at this time?
Well, the tabling would indicate that we would intend to bring that back at a specific time. Normally, we do not table an item unless we know for certain that's going to come back. At this point, it's fine to just deny that portion of it, and if things change, can instruct staff to bring it back at that time.
Let me rephrase my motion that the only ordinance that we are deciding today is the prohibition of sale of e-cigarettes to minors under the age of 18, possession, purchase, and consumption of e-cigarettes by minors being prohibited, and that vendor-assisted sales are required for e-cigarette purchases. And that is in the form of a motion, and I would...
A second.
Okay, and I have a second. Now, is there any further discussion?
I want to go on record that I disagree. I think we ought to ban it all. But I will vote for this ordinance because I think it's important that we prohibit it from 18 and above, or 18 and below. So I just want that, I mean, because if I vote no, then I'm saying no, I think we ought to sell it to minors. And that's not what I'm saying. I do think that 18 and younger should be banned, and so that, just for the record.
Okay. Other discussion on the item?
Does that mean you gotta be 19 if he's saying 18 and below? 18-year-olds can't smoke that stuff, or is it below the age of 18?
Under the age of 18.
What are cigarettes?
So it's younger than 18. Yeah.
Younger than 18. So 18 is okay. Okay.
Any other questions? We have a motion and a second, and we're now prepared to vote.
Mayor Archibald.
Yes.
Councilman Price.
Yes.
Councilman Spano.
Yes.
Councilman Williams.
Yes.
Councilman Hardaway.
Yes.
Councilman McAllister.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries, and the ban of e-cigarettes to minors in those regarded areas is approved today. This goes into effective when?
10 days from the date of publication.
10 days from the date of publication.
We
Let
publish
the
on
record
Sunday.
Show that. And I know several of y'all have come for this very reason, and if y'all would like to go on about your daily duties, we have some other items to approve here, so thank you for being here.
Thank you, gentlemen. We see a document on that. So the publication will be out in the newspaper.
Sunday.
It's Sunday's paper.
I had to come over from Clyde to get it, but
We're now going to move to item 7.3, and I'm going to ask David Sarter to present this item.
Good morning. My name is David Sarter. I'm the building official for the City of Abilene. The item we have before you this morning is the proposed adoption of the 2012 version of the construction codes, which will be for the building code, residential building code, existing building code, energy conservation code, plumbing, mechanical, and fuel gas codes. The codes were all reviewed by citizens committees, ad hoc committees that were put together. They were reviewed by those committees. Those committees made recommendations to the appropriate boards, Board of Building Standards or the Plumbing, Mechanical, Electrical, Swimming Pool Board of Appeals, and those boards have made the recommendation to council. Majority of the proposed amendments are currently in the amendment pamphlets are currently codes that we have adopted already under the 2009. Many of the changes that are in the 2012 codes are changes made to clarify requirements, which someone has attempted to make the requirements easier to understand, but not change the substance of what those requirements are. And a large number are for updating industry standards like underwriters' laboratory standards or different material standards that are out there that are updated on a regular basis. We have had a few local amendments that we were able to eliminate due to inclusion in the 2012 versions of the codes. I'll start with the residential code. This is one where we were able to get rid of our local amendment. Locally, we had an amendment which would allow a fence 7 foot in height to be constructed without the requirement for a permit. As the code was written, it was required for fences 6 foot and above. So our local amendment goes away. It doesn't change any of the construction requirements for a fence, simply that if it goes over 7 foot, then it is required a permit, and fences over 7 foot in height to require additional approval of planning and zoning. We have an amendment for dwelling units in the IRC, which is requiring any windows that in a window seal that is at a height 72 inches above grade or the floor below requires certain protective devices, fall protection devices for small children. There are exceptions to the 24-inch seal height, and the 3 examples of those exceptions are listed across the page. There are ASTM 2090 listed devices that can be installed, which prevents the window from opening to allow a 4-inch sphere to pass, which is a standard dimension for child safety. The second one shows a blocking or a screening device, which would get the dimension up above the 24-inch level. And the last one would be a fixed or solid panel, a glazed panel, which would make the opening above the 24-inch height. During the review of the codes, we did look at many of the major manufacturers, and all of the manufacturers currently provide windows with these installed from the factory, so it's not an issue of availability. And there are a number of different retrofit devices. If there was a window that didn't have the devices, it could be retrofit with this. But again, the code is not a retroactive requirement. Existing windows that were in place under the code they were constructed and approved under do not have to meet this requirement unless they were being replaced with an entire unit, and at that time they would need to comply. The code now recognizes wireless technology for interconnected smoke detectors. The codes require the smoke detectors in our homes to all be interconnected so that if one goes off in one area, all of the smoke alarms will go off in all areas to identify that there is a fire hazard in the home so people can evacuate. Hardwiring is expensive and time consuming. Now with the wireless technology being reliable, they can be installed at a lower cost. For residential mechanical plumbing and fuel gas, there are just a few items there. One is now on a dryer vent. The support dimensions have been increased from 4 foot to 12 foot, and it now requires mechanical fasteners. Currently, the code does not allow mechanical fasteners to be used on a dryer vent, simply for the fact that the screws that protrude inside the duct will allow lint and dust to accumulate, clog the vent, or create a fire hazard. The code has now changed that. And again, going back, the reason for the 4-foot support dimension is the ducts are not screwed together. They're not fastened with anything more than a UL 181 listed tape to hold them together. So they have to be supported at a smaller distance so that they don't have a tendency to come apart. Excuse me. Now with the mechanical fasteners, the dimension for the support can be stretched to 12 feet. There is a provision, though, that states that the screws or the fasteners cannot protrude more than 1/8 of an inch inside the duct. This diminishes the possibility of the clogging of the duct or the buildup. Safety pans are no longer required on tankless water heaters. Currently, the code is silent. It just simply says a water heater in an attic has to have a safety pan. It doesn't distinguish between tankless or tank type. And that's been an issue for a while. A storage type heater obviously is storing many gallons of water, and if there's a problem with that heater and that volume of water starts to come down, it's going to create a problem, so the safety pan makes perfect sense. On a tankless water heater, there are just coils of pipes inside the heater itself, which are no different than the pipes that are feeding in or feeding out. If there was a problem with it, you would have the same issue, so a safety pan is really not necessary, so that's gone away. Under the 2009 code, there are provisions for gray water recycling system design, but they are contained within the appendix chapters, and the appendix chapters are not adopted. If someone wanted to use that, then we obviously would allow them to do that as an alternate method using the appendix. But now the code has brought the recycling systems into an actual chapter of the code. Therefore, they don't have to be approved as an alternate method anymore. They can be used as an alternate design anytime someone desires to do such. Under the commercial building code, they've revised the requirements for labeling of fire barriers and firewalls, which will require signage, as you see in the diagram, identifying any wall that is required to be a fire barrier wall to be signed, and the signs have to be placed at 30-foot intervals and within 15 foot of the end of the wall. This is very important because once a building is constructed, those walls are built and they're verified that they are all protected, all penetrations are protected with fire stop assemblies that are listed to prevent fire and smoke passage through that wall. Then we need some mechanism to maintain, for the history of that building, that this wall is going to be maintained. The signage does that. Now the more frequency of the signage is going to make it more readily identifiable to later communication cables or whatever penetration some worker may come down the line and have to go through that wall. They will know that they're penetrating a firewall and they need to take appropriate action to seal it back up so it serves the function that's designed to. 2009 code required fire sprinkler systems in any establishment that had upholstered furniture displayed, stored, or where it was manufactured. There was no size limitation. It didn't matter how small it was. If they were displaying, selling, or manufacturing upholstered furniture, they had to put fire sprinklers in. The 2012 code has amended that, and now they've set specific benchmarks for when a sprinkler system would not have to be installed. And the example you see here is for a mercantile, the store that was selling upholstered furniture now can be up to 5,000 square foot in size and not be required to have a fire sprinkler system. So I think this is a lessening of a restriction, which I think will be helpful.
Is 5,000 square feet the cap on that?
That is the cap. Anything over 5,000 would require, yes, sir. Okay. In a normal mercantile selling any type of a product, the threshold is 12,000, and below 12,000 would not have to be sprinkled above wood. So it is a little more restrictive than any other mercantile, but it is less restrictive than the current code is now. Maybe I lost batteries. Okay. Next, in hotels, motels, those types of facilities, the code now requires an additional exit sign at all required means of egress. The sign you see at the top of the door is the one that's always been required. They're now requiring the additional one you see at the lower level of the floor. The reasoning behind this is in the event that there is a fire, there's a lot of smoke in the egress elements. The smoke is going to go to the ceiling and start coming down. The occupants are going to have to go to the floor. That upper sign is going to get obscured pretty quickly, so the lower sign will be visible to direct people to a safe place of discharge. Spaces beneath grandstands and bleachers are now required to be separated from the seating area above by use of fire-rated assemblies. This requirement does not, as the diagram shows, it is not for ticket booths less than 100 square feet or for toilet rooms. This would be for any other use other than those. Storage facilities, concession stands, any of those kind of areas which could be more of a fire hazard risk than a toilet room or the ticket booths under 100 square feet would require that simply to protect the spectators who are sitting in the bleachers or grandstands above that and have no idea that there may be an issue below them. The code requires at specific occupant load settings for a building that there be separate facilities for men and women. The code now says that you have to have a defined men's and a defined women's facility. The code's now been amended so that if you're only required one water closet for a men's and a women's facility, you can now use two family or assisted use toilet rooms to meet the requirement for the men's and women's. Therefore, you could have 2 assisted use toilet rooms and not have to define them as men's and women's. They could be used either way. Just a little more flexibility, I suppose.
And all of this is not retroactive, correct?
No, sir.
Okay.
None of these
I
codes
thought
are
you said that,
retroactive.
but I wanted to make sure because
The codes are not retroactive, and they're stated as such unless you're doing changes, additions, alterations, repairs. Those items that you are doing would be affected.
Okay.
Under the energy code, it probably has the biggest impact. We are currently using the 2000 energy code. We are looking at the 2012 energy code here. There have been several cycles and changes since the implementation of the 2000. The biggest impact is system commissioning reports are required on large HVAC systems. A commissioning report is simply the energy code requires certain energy saving elements, a maximum usage of energy for specific items, outside air being brought in at a specific rate, exhaust air at certain rates, all kinds of, the building has to be built airtight so that your infiltration is lessened. The system commission report simply is a way of verifying that all those things that were required and appear to be there actually function the way they're supposed to be functioning. Most of your larger commercial establishments are going to be having the commissioning report anyway, or they're going to have all the elements there that can be put together by someone pretty easily. They'll have design professionals that are doing that or requiring it, or they will have all the elements there to be able to put that together. There are exceptions for smaller systems, mechanical systems with a 480,000 BTU total heating or a 600,000 BTU cooling rating would be exempted from the requirement for the commissioning report. And then Section 403.3 gives exceptions for units serving dwelling units, and that would be like in apartments or extended stay hotels, motels, those kind of things, sleeping units in hotels, motels, boarding houses, etc. So those are exempted from that requirement. It's mostly going to be a large commercial kind of a issue. Then it works. Under residential, the 2012 code requires what's called a blower door test to verify the sealing of the building envelope. As I understand it, you basically seal up the building and pressurize it, and if there's any leakage, then the test is going to verify that there's leakage in the building. It's not holding what it's supposed to. There is an allowable amount of leakage, but if it exceeds that, it doesn't pass. The 2009 code, which the majority of the building envelope requirements, the committee chose to use the 2009 levels because the state of Texas has adopted the 2009 energy code as the minimum level for the state. So they matched the 2009 levels while adopting the 2012. All of the building envelope requirements matched the 2009, if that makes sense. Under the 2009, there are 2 options. You can perform the blower door test if you choose, or you can choose a visual inspection option, which the visual inspection option is the inspection that our inspectors perform currently. So they can stay with what they currently have, or if they choose to do a blower door, then they have that option to do it. This is just a representation of where we currently are, where the 2009 level is and where the 2012 level is for some of the building envelope requirements. The glazed fenestration, you'll see the 0.60, and on a solar heat gain coefficient, the lower the number, the higher the efficiency. So the 60 down to a 0.25 in the 2012 is a considerable change, but the 2009 level is at 0.30. Is where the committee is recommended to go to. The ceiling insulation is the same, an R30, and the wood frame wall insulation requirement is still the R13. So the fenestration solar heat gain coefficient was the one that changed.
So what you're saying is what's being proposed to adopt is to continue to hold the 2000, or to adopt the 2009 numbers?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
not
the red
2012.
numbers would be the ones that are proposed to be utilized. Yes, sir. One other item is eave baffles will be required. They're required. The amount of insulation that's being placed in attics now is getting fairly deep. The blown insulation that they're using could be 12 to 18 inches deep, depending on what R value they're trying to attain. And the issue is that the attic has to be ventilated, and the air that blows through the attic can dislodge that insulation down on the attic vents, thereby blocking them, and then we don't have the proper ventilation in the attic, which is not good for energy or for the building itself, for getting moisture out of the attic, heat, etc. So the code's requiring baffles, which are basically just some form of a device that would be placed across the bottom of the rafters, as you see in the yellow highlight, and those only have to be placed where the vents are susceptible to having insulation blown over them, to prevent that insulation from dislodging and coming down on them.
So it's not the entire length?
It wouldn't necessarily have to be the entire length.
Soffits are.
There are some builders out there who use a continuous soffit vent. It's a manufactured product that is continuously ventilated. That they could possibly have to do the entire thing, or we would have to do some calculations on what is the minimum that's required, therefore what space has to be maintained open.
Right, okay.
When you first said that, I thought you said E-baffles, and I thought, here we go again with an E we're going to discuss. I didn't see the word Eve. I just heard E-baffles, and I thought, oh, no. Here we go again.
Moving on.
Thank you.
High efficacy lamps. I always try to say efficiency. High efficacy lamps are required, and the recommendation is to use the 2009 levels on those as well. The 2012 code requires a minimum of 75% of the lamps or lighting, permanent lighting, to be high efficacy lighting. The 2009 requires a minimum of 50%, and that's for residential and commercial. What is high efficacy, you say? High efficacy lamps are compact fluorescent lights. The T8 are smaller linear fluorescent lights. Your compact fluorescent, your LED lights, those would all be examples of high efficacy. And the slide goes on to give you the definition. I won't read that out for you, but it basically tells you to meet that definition, each different type of bulb would need to meet those levels. And again, that's only for the permanently installed lighting. So lamps, cord, those kind of things are not affected by this. It's the permanently installed fixtures. Under the mechanical code, there are a couple of items. A Type 1 hood is no longer required under the 2012 for electrical cooking appliances that are compliant with Section 17 of Underwriters Laboratory 710B standard. And basically what that standard is it measures the amount of grease-laden vapors that are exhausted by a particular device. It's very low level, therefore they're comfortable that we're not going to have a grease buildup issue from these type of devices, therefore they don't really need a Type 1 hood. And a Type 1 hood is the type of hood you would see in a restaurant where we're doing frying, grilling, those kind of things. It has the ANSEL system, the fire suppression system, grease filters, a fire-rated shaft on the exhaust duct, a lot of elements to prevent the hazard from the grease fires that could occur. So this, the 2009 required conveyor-type pizza ovens, as you see here, to be under a Type 1 hood, which was a change from the 2003. They could be under a Type 2, which you would typically expect to see above a pizza oven. They went to a 1 at that point. Now they've come back to where that type of an oven, if it's compliant with 710B, could be installed without the use of a Type 1. Speaking of Type 1 hoods, the field-applied grease duct enclosure products cannot be used over the top of a hood that penetrates a ceiling unless the manufacturer has approved it for that installation. The code requires that if the hood itself, the top of the hood, penetrates the ceiling above it where it's exposed to an attic or a concealed space, it has to be treated the same as the exhaust shaft. And the exhaust shaft has got to be enclosed in a 1 hour minimally rated enclosure. And the whole purpose of that is in the event of a grease fire, that hood is contained within that 1 hour enclosure so that the building is not subject to fire damage spreading through the attic area because of that. When the hood penetrates the ceiling, it has to be treated the same as the shaft. Therefore, it has to be in that 1 hour enclosure. Common practice was to use, and let me explain the fire wrap. The fire wrap is it can be any number of things, but manufacturers make it differently. Some of it looks very similar to fiberglass insulation you might have seen before with a foil back on it. And that material has been listed and rated to have a 1 hour fire rating when it's installed in a certain way. So a lot of folks have gone to using that on the exhaust duct because it's quicker and easier than trying to build a rated shaft out of sheetrock and sheet metal studs. That's very labor intensive. So when the hood penetrates the ceiling, they would use the same product for that hood compliance. The code recognizes that some manufacturers don't recommend that their product be used for that application. So this code requirement came in, and again, if a manufacturer says it can be used and gives you directions on how to use it for that application, then it's perfectly fine. If they don't, then you would do the sheetrock method or use some other product that would be listed for that installation.
I wish they would add this code 25 years ago. It would save me a lot of money.
Sounds like a fire. That is the end of the original presentation. I do have 3 additional amendments to put before you this morning that came from questions and comments that Councilman Price had presented, which resulted in these 3 amendments being brought forward. And I'll explain as we look at them. Section 1612 of the IBC, it has a spot that requires us to insert specific information of which we did not. And if you will look, we've stricken through the description of installing and put the City of Abilene and January 6, 2012, Taylor County, etc. Those are the dates of the flood maps we obtained from Public Works, so that should rectify that oversight on my part. The next one, or next 2, the first one is under the IBC 2611. You'll see at the end of the section, 402.16 is stricken through. 402.16 does not exist. It should really be pointing to 402.6.4, so that corrects that incorrect notation. And the last one is under the existing building code, which again, it requires you to insert a date of the first building code adopted by the municipality, which appears to be the July 31st, 1913 adoption of building codes by the City of Abilene. So I would submit those to you for inclusion with the appropriate pamphlets to correct those oversights. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of David on this?
So how many public hearings do we have on these before it gets to council? And about how often do we have codes, new codes considered?
The model code groups produce them on a 3-year basis, every 3 years. We attempt to look at those every 3 years. Obviously, we didn't adopt the 2006 version. We were adopting existing building code and other issues we had, which pushed us so late into the cycle, it didn't really make any sense to try to adopt the 6, so we waited until the 9 and did that. So that is the cycle. Public hearings, the ad hoc committee meetings are open and those were held weekly until we got through the entire codes. And then it goes to each of the boards, the MPE board and the Board of Building Standards, for one public meeting, and then it comes to the council.
Other questions of David? So, in essence, by adopting all of the codes that are mentioned, the International Building Code, Residential, Energy, I can't list them all, but anyway, all of those mechanical codes with local amendments and the three,
I can
go back, those
three.
What are we calling those?
Additional amendments?
Amendments that clarify the code.
Yes, sir.
They're listed there, and there's three of them altogether. That is what is before us today to move forward on, so that the staff can have these in place when we're working with builders and contractors. So is there any other questions or discussions on these items?
I just have my hesitation. I have made my way through the IBC. I've not finished reading all the documents and voting for something that hadn't been read, just as I expressed in March when it first came up.
Well, to the extent that you find something that you think is it's like you can always go back a month from now and revise a local amendment or a deal, and I would encourage you to do that if you so desire. We can bring these items before us at any time we have a meeting if they're duly posted. And so I'd ask for a motion to approve the building codes as they were presented with the amendments, both local amendments and the three clarifying amendments.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion by Councilman Williams and a second by Councilman Hardaway. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote.
Mayor, we need a public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. We've had so many people speak today. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I think, except for you, Dale, you might be the only one that's not on the staff here today, I guess. But this item calls for a public hearing. I'd like to open the public hearing if anyone would like to speak for or against any of the building codes as they've been presented with local amendments and clarifications. Seeing no one. Okay. Seeing no one wanting to speak at the public hearing, I will close the public hearing. We have previously been given a motion to approve by Councilman Williams and a second by Councilman Hardaway. Now, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote.
Councilman Williams?
Yes.
Councilman Hardaway?
Yes.
Councilman McAllister?
Yes.
Councilman Price?
No.
Councilman Spano?
Yes.
Mayor Archibald?
Yes.
Motion carries.
The motion carries and the building codes are approved as presented with amendments and clarifications. That concludes our regular agenda. I advise you we're going into executive session pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, Section 551-071, consultation with our attorney, 551-072, deliberations about real property, 551-074, personnel matters, and 551-087, deliberations about business prospects and economic development. Thank you for being here today.